morning. We have a quorum. There is no labor update. No one's here to speak, so we're going into closed session. Order the first meeting of this new year, January 14th, 2014. We'll start our meeting as always with an invocation. Councilmember Constant will deliver the invocation.
Thank you, Mayor. I know this is unusual, but I chose to do the invocation myself today. Usually, the first meeting of every year, I've had the honor of bringing my own personal priest from St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church to do the invocation. But we got a new priest this year, and we were lucky enough to have him come see us just a couple of months ago. So this is my first meeting of not only 2014, but also my final year of service on the City Council. And I know, Mayor, it's your final year of service as well. We have 351 days left, in case you haven't been counting, sir. Before I say the actual invocation, I want to say best of luck to my colleagues who are running for office or running for re-election this year, especially our Vice Mayor Madison, Sam, Pierluigi, and Rose as they pursue that gavel that you have in front of you, Mayor. So on with the invocation. We meet to serve our community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly, to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognize our responsibility to the past and to the future, and the rights and needs of both individuals and our community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and on our efforts here today. May we act wisely and well this afternoon and throughout 2014. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Constant. We'll now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll be aided today by third graders from Payne Elementary School from what council district? District 1. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item of business are the orders of the day. Are there any changes to the printed agenda that we need to consider? We have a motion to approve the orders of the day. On that motion, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Those are approved. As noted in the orders of the day, adjournment today will be in memory of Martha Solis Mendoza, who passed on August 14th, 2013. She dedicated her life to her community and family. Councilor Campos has some additional comments.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a little bit of an unorthodox delivery, given that Martha Solis Mendoza made her biggest impact in Southern California. But for the city of San Jose, the biggest impact she made is that she is the mother of Ed Solis, who's played such a significant role in our city through Parks and Recs, but more specifically in District 5, leading the Alum Rock Youth Center as well as the Mayfair Community Center to the types of services and the significance of those facilities that they bring to their community is all a testament to Ed Solis, the son of Marta Solis. So I thought it would be appropriate, given that we want to be able to support our City of San Jose family members, to adjourn this meeting in Martha's memory. So I'll read a little bit about Marta. Marta was born in El Paso, Texas in 1946. She's the fourth child of seven. She was a little girl who loved to be close to her father as he tended horses and drove trucks throughout the state of Texas. When Marta was 13, her infant sister Yolanda was stricken with a rare and deadly disease, and because of this, Marta's grandfather moved the entire family to Los Angeles to be closer to Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. After a year of treatment, Marta's sister survived, and the family remained in the Los Angeles suburb of San Gabriel. Although the move was hard and the family was experiencing hardship, Marta was the only child in her family to graduate from high school. At an early age, Marta knew the importance of education. She became a single mother of two before meeting her husband, Eliseo Mendoza. They married in 1972 and had one son together. Although young Eddie and Linda were not biological children, Eliseo shared his love for the three children and treated them all equally. Marta was a homemaker and raised her children with love and respect. Dinners as a family were a must, and so the children did their daily chores. Not to mention Sunday Mass was definite for the whole family. Marta was also her children's CCD teacher and frequently opened her doors to local kids to come to CCD in her home. Those of you that are not Catholic, it's catechism. She was an avid leader in the PTA and Cub Scouts. She made it known that education was key to success. Marta was also a huge sports fan, and I have to mention, she was a huge Dodger fan. Ed made me say that. She also loved to watch her kids participate in wrestling in both high school and at the collegiate level. Marta was extremely passionate and humble person. She carried with her warm heart, especially towards her children. Marta also often hosted kids from the neighborhood for dinner a few times a week without giving it a second thought. She loved everyone unconditionally, and she expressed it through hospitality and towards those who needed it most. She was someone you can rely on to lift your spirits. Marta Solis passed away at her home on August 14th, 2013, surrounded by her loving family at the age of 67. She lived a full life and will be greatly missed. And those of you that know Ed Solis, now you know where his passion comes from and why he loves this city so much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Campos. Next item is the closed session report. City Attorney.
We have no report.
Amazing as it seems, we have no ceremonial items. First time ever, I think. But that's okay. We'll make up for it at future meetings, I'm sure. It's too late to add one. We just did orders of the day. So let's move to the consent calendar. Are there items councilors would like to pull for discussion? I'd like to pull 2.8.
I have a travel report.
Councilor Campos, so we'll do a travel report. Any others? Councilor Herrera? Travel report. Others to be pulled? 2.14, was there somebody who wanted to pull that one? No, okay. So we have a travel report and we have item 2.8, which we'll vote on separately. So is there a motion on the balance? Motion is to approve the balance of the consent calendar. I have no request. Oh, we do have the request to speak, so we'll take those. Arthur O'Connell.
I was told that a council member was going to pull 214, so I came down to speak to it, and they didn't pull it, but I'll speak to it anyway. I support the additional funding for the hearing officers, but I want to point out to you that this issue has another leg, and that is the fee that everyone who lives in a mobile home pays annually. It is split between the park owner and the park residents, and there's over 10,000 folks in San Jose who pay this fee. So I would encourage you guys, the next time the HCDC makes a recommendation, I make recommendations on the basis of principle and not if I'm involved. I would recommend that this fee being raised by at least $1 or $2, because that's another potentially $22,000 in the kitty. So I hope you look at that additionally.
That concludes the public testimony on the consent calendar. We have a motion to approve the balance, excluding the travel report and item 2.8. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. That's approved. The travel report, Councilmember Campos and Councilmember Herrera.
Thank you, Mayor. So at the end of November, I was fortunate enough to have gotten a scholarship from the National Association of Latino Elected Officials on disaster preparedness, in which we went through Incident Command System 402 class, which actually put us through real life, a real life situation. In our case, it was a 100-year flood. And one of the things that they did is they, being very specific to elected officials, that the best thing that we can do is to let the professionals handle the situation. And that, you know, saying that to a room of elected officials, folks didn't want to hear that. But, you know, I mean, we have very, very, I mean, experts in all the different fields. Those folks are going to be the ones that are going to take us to safety and so forth. This was a part 2 of a class that I had attended the year prior, which set us up for this class. One thing that did come out of this, which I'm very, very pleased to be able to report back, our Office of Emergency Services is well ahead of a lot of other jurisdictions in this country, and there were some very big cities that were in attendance, as well as states that had their legislators there. So I think we should be proud of our Office of Emergency Services, in the work that they do, and how they have a plan for our city. I do come back with a recommendation, and that from the training, as well as my own recommendation. When Councilmember Rocha and I got elected, that first year we went through a Homeland Security disaster preparedness training. I think that should be something that we should do on a more consistent basis, and I'll give you an example why. The first training that we went to at this NALEO conference, 4 months later, Hurricane Sandy hit the East Coast, and getting feedback from those elected officials when that actually happened was some of the information that they were using was valuable, and they didn't realize how unprepared they were until this major disaster hit. And also standing on the sideline watching the big fire that we had. Everything that took place, from what I was able to see, was textbook as to what they trained as, how our departments handled that. So again, we should be proud of our departments on how they handled that particular situation. And as a matter of fact, those types of incidences are the more likely types of incidences that we need to be prepared for. So that's my report back on that travel. And then I also traveled with the California League of Cities Latino Caucus. We set our agenda for this year, which will continue to be supporting the League on economic development, trying to figure out how to create something new from the tax increment RDA that we relied on so heavily, as well as water. I mean, water is huge. 50% of the water we get from the Delta, and if you ever gone to the Highway 5 from here, you can see that our biggest water storage center, San Luis Reservoir, is down to historically low levels, and we need to figure out a way to be able to store water efficiently, replenish our aquifers, and all of that has a lot to do with the governor's proposal that he's floating around. So we need to pay attention to that. The League of Cities is paying attention to that, and at some point, our council, we should be taking a position on that. So thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Herrera.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm going to talk about a conference that I attended back in November. I represented San Jose at the National League of Cities Conference in Seattle, November 13th through 16th, and voted as a voting delegate at the annual business meeting. I also had the opportunity to meet with senior reps from Microsoft and toured their facility and had some very productive discussions about partnerships in San Jose with our Innovation Center. Also had an opportunity to meet with Philips Lighting. I toured a pilot project there featuring the integrated smart light pole. It's exciting, and it can accommodate radio unit devices in the pole, base units, distributed ability to host multiple telecom providers, so we don't have different telecom agencies establishing individual unsightly poles everywhere. Suitable for remote light management. It's a possible platform for additional smart city functions, including electric vehicles, smart metering, and sensing. And it's the first step on a roadmap towards higher integration with lighting. So it's certainly just one solution, but it was interesting to look at, and it's coming back to the T&E committee where we're going to look into it further. Thank you.
I think that's it on trip reports. Item 2.8 I had asked to be pulled because I want to give Councilmember LICCARDO a chance to abstain. It's a sale of city-owned property at San Fernando Street and Jackson Avenue. I didn't have any other comments or anything. Is there a motion? Motion is to approve. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed. The motion's approved. That concludes the consent calendar. Move now to item 3.1, report of the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My pleasure to report on you. Actually, my first city manager's report as your city manager. Actually been in the seat, despite no council meeting over close to the last month, the opportunity to work with our staff through the holidays. And simply like to take the opportunity, perhaps pick up on Councilmember Campos's comments and the outstanding work that our staff do working 24/7, particularly through the holidays. So good news, bad news, no weather-related issues for our staff to deal with, but nonetheless prepared, and appreciate the work that our police and fire departments have done through that time period, as well as our airport and the wastewater staff in particular, as well as all other staff that were on call or on duty throughout the holidays. Looking forward, simply like to put a plug in for the Neighborhood Leaders Budget Priority Setting Session that will be occurring this Saturday. Become our annual event, thanks to the leadership of the mayor. And also note that this year we will be adding an online component, so San Jose residents are invited to register via our website and participate in the online version of the what we're affectionately calling Budget Game. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. That concludes my report.
Thank you. We'll move to item 3.3, legislative guiding principles, priorities, and advocacy issues for the year. Betsy Shotwell is here, as is Roxanne Miller, I think.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, Betsy Shotwell, Director of Intergovernmental Relations. Joining me is Roxanne Miller, the city's legislative advocate and representative in Sacramento. You have before you today the annual review of the city's legislative guiding principles and priorities for the coming legislative sessions in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. Oh, okay, mouse is disabled, I've been told. All right, so moving forward, the legislative guiding principles, they serve as the foundation for staff recommendations on legislation that goes before the Rules Committee and the Council for direction and action. The draft every year in the cycle goes to all the policy committees for review and comments, then to the Rules Committee, and then before you for adoption and discussion. The next part of the attachment in the memo, it includes the 2014 state and federal legislative priorities and advocacy issues. Each year the department submits specific legislative priorities. They can be for federal funding, city-sponsored legislation, or perhaps policy issues. The item then goes to Rules Committee, and then of course again to the full council. Next, the 2014 federal forecast is articulated in the memo that you have, although it was written early last month. So just to give you a little bit of update, and the Patton Boggs, our city's federal lobbyist team in Washington, will be providing some more updates for you this week. Recent noteworthy action in Congress includes the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2013, House Joint Resolution 59, which was passed by Congress and signed by the President last month. This measure sets the limits on spending for the fiscal year 2014 and fiscal year 14 and 15. Then the appropriators introduced the actual budget bill for FY14 yesterday. So that is good news because the continuing resolution of the current budget expires tomorrow on January 15th. So that is moving ahead, and in order to not have another a federal shutdown, they are introducing and passing, the House passed this morning a stopgap measure, which that will extend the federal budget to Saturday. That will give both houses in Congress the opportunity to review the 1,500-page omnibus bill and vote on it before Saturday, or by Saturday, so we can continue on with the federal processes. The next hurdle or challenge will be that Congress needs to approve an increase to the federal debt ceiling. That deadline is specifically February 7th, but there is some U.S. Treasury provisions that can take place, emergency measures, that it definitely, though, needs to be done by February or early March at the latest, so as to not default. With that, we will move over to the 2014 state forecast, and Roxanne Miller will provide just a brief overview of where things are in Sacramento.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. With regard to Sacramento, we are starting the second year of the two-year legislative session. The calendar that is before you indicates that they did convene last Monday. The governor did have an obligation to present, as is always in the Constitution, the obligation to present the proposed state budget to start FY July 1 of 14. And with that in mind, the governor did present his budget. There was a little snafu, shall we say, like the year before, and it was leaked by someone to the press about 36 hours before the intended presentation by Governor Brown. But in any case, it was highly speculated as to what would be there. Just very briefly, it is a budget of general fund budget of approximately $106 million. This is somewhat of an increase. The budget reflects several key actions, including certainly a reliance ongoing of the voters' approval in 2012 of the increase in the personal property tax and temporary increase in the sales tax that has allowed the legislature, with the leadership of this governor holding the line and keeping his commitment to the public, that this was a temporary revenue source. We are now in a position, as indicated by the governor, that by next year, the end of the next full fiscal year, not the one coming up, will be in a position where the legislature has retired substantially what was referred to as the wall of debt. There was at one point a number of years ago, you may recall, where 1 year's deficit was approaching $50 billion. So that is good news, but with that also comes a clear statement and indication from Governor Brown that although there's a lot of pent-up demand, there's a lot of major programs that are thought as a high priority by the legislature in particular. He has presented to the public and to the legislature what he considers the best alternatives at this point in time. Now it will become in the legislator's court, and they will have an opportunity to deliberate. Keep in mind that with the voters' approval of Prop 25 a number of years ago, of course, we now have two supermajorities both in the Senate and the Assembly. So, but there was relief from not having supermajorities with regard to the budget when the voters approved that proposition that allowed a budget to be passed by a simple majority. So with that, today Betsy's presenting to you the proposed guidelines and priorities. Certainly there will still be an anticipated shortfall. And if I might just clarify, the wall of debt did not include the other debt and debt service obligations beyond the general fund. Those are in excess of $300 billion, which obviously is going to continue to be worked on as far as resolving those issues. So with regard to issues that we expect to be in a lead role, certainly the city has demonstrated its ongoing interest in financing transportation programs. The city is one of the lead supporters of legislation that will reduce from the current 2/3 vote to 55% for passage of bonds for transportation infrastructure. In addition to that, we are anticipating that the bond that was approved previously to be on the ballot, the water bond, which the legislature had approved, some $11 billion in projects, but it has will need to be either retooled. There is talk as recent as today that they will take out what is called some of the pork projects and get back to all sources and efforts to address certainly our water planning for the future, but also recognizing the acute drought situation we find ourselves in this particular year. So there is encouragement that there will be a deal struck there. With regard to economic development, the governor's budget does include amendments to the Infrastructure Finance Authority currently in existence. You may recall that that tool has not been used very readily because of the high requirements with regard to voter approval. He is proposing, however, to enhance the use of that tool in several ways, including reducing the vote requirement to 55%. In addition, we will be active on issues involving certainly medical marijuana, homelessness, a permanent funding source for affordable housing, high-speed rail. This governor has, certainly we all know, headlines made it very clear that although many of us at the local level were looking to take advantage of the cap and trade funding to be made available through auction of those credits, that again this year the governor has decided that he is going to utilize at least $250 million of that 800 plus for purposes of a funding source for high-speed rail. Another issue that certainly we'll be dealing with is Prop 39. Again, this is an alternative funding source for energy of all kinds of sources to be utilized in public facilities. That will still be there. And just briefly, that's a flavor for some of the issues that we will certainly be very active in.
Okay. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions. Staff is also available in the audience as well.
Thank you. I'd like for you to think for a minute and talk for a little bit about what revenue sources we have to worry about with the state. Every legislative session, they get in a little trouble and they start looking at local revenues. So we thought we had protected local revenues with Proposition 1A. I think that worked for sales taxes and property taxes. Didn't work for redevelopment dollars. We lost the enterprise zone funding stream. So what else is there? Because while they're using the language of surplus, it's not actually a surplus. And the wall of debt, as you mentioned, is actually a pony wall. And when I was in construction, that's a little wall. So this is a pony wall in front of us. That's a wall over there. And so that wall of debt is huge, $218 billion just for retiree pension and health care for the state.
Right.
So they may come looking for local revenues again to try to do something about that or the other problems. So what are the things that we anticipate that they have tried to take in the past that we need to be worried about besides everything?
Yes, the demand is so great for the unattended to needs that we have at the local level, in combination with the what has been the stress on the budget with regard to the severe shortage of state dollars, with the exception of Prop 30. So although we like to think that good work has been done in protecting constitutionally identified funding sources, I think part of our best protection this year is a governor who's standing firm with the legislature on what they should view realistically as the needs that they see programs should have that deserve some additional funding. Having said that, I think certainly on the transportation side, we could potentially see a moving around of dollars within a category of local government. So we perhaps don't totally lose it, but we lose to a large extent control of it. I think one of the big questions out there at this point, and the governor and the court is dealing with it right now, is the reality of the dealing with the release recidivism rates and how the state chooses to deal with that whole issue. What it means in terms of dollars, the responsibility that is put not only on local probation in counties, but also on public law enforcement in cities. So there are a number of situations, as you point out, Mr. Mayor, where it could indeed, something could start to move, but I think we're probably in a better place this year with regard to the improved economic situation.
Certainly better than previous years where at least the state is talking about having a surplus. It makes it more difficult for them to argue they need to take our money, even though they don't really have a surplus. But I think you're right that the transportation dollars that have been used from time to time to borrow or reallocate is something that's an old standby for them, so we have to be concerned about that. And considering that we don't have nearly enough transportation dollars to meet our own needs, every dollar they take from us is going to hurt. Councilmember KHAMIS.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually share your concern, especially on that last point. I noticed in your legislative priorities here set by the Rules Committee, transportation was not part of it, and I think that it, you know, with all this talk of high-speed rail and still needing more bolts on the bridge in San Francisco, that you know, what I'd like for us to have as the #1 priority, besides all of these, is getting more of transportation dollars to the city of San Jose and other local cities, because I think Oakland and San Francisco have had more than their fair share. And you know, with Jim Bell being the chairman of the Transportation Committee, one would expect us to get further notice for our potholes on Highway 87 and you know, I travel 87 every day. I guarantee you there's potholes that are not being fixed. What are we doing about that? And can we make it our ultimate, I mean, top priority? I mean, I can't say that I agree with all of these either, but I'm willing to overlook them as long as we have some, you know, movement toward that direction. I'm disgusted to see that they're even thinking about spending more money without looking at fixing our roads.
Council member, may I just add for clarification, embedded in the guiding principles and then in the attached legislative priorities are a number of priorities related to transportation at the federal and state level, which underscore the exact same concerns that you're stating as far as funding and the infrastructure that is lagging that we need corrective of. I don't know if transportation wishes to add anything to that, but believe me, it is an extremely high priority for the city and has been for a number of years.
Are you getting any response from our current, I mean, our elected, locally elected officials, Paul Fong, any of those guys helping us?
Yes, they are. As just referenced, Jim Bell is the budget sub-2 chair, which handles resources and transportation. So he is in a key position on this issue. Might also want to mention to you today that there are other avenues in play at this point as well, and that is a very strong, well-organized effort by the part of Transportation California and an alliance of unions and contractors, so that if the legislature does not step up and take some affirmative action that starts to realize real dollars to fix our local need and roads, that they have turned over their initiative to the Attorney General. Title and summary has been completed, and they are looking at going out for signatures as an alternative if the legislature, or in addition to, because the need is so great, as you're indicating.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the top concerns in my district, the fact that our roads are being neglected, and all I hear about is more money being spent on bolts on bridges that went way over budget. And you know, quite frankly, we have a lot more people on the roads here in San Jose, and we connect a lot more of Silicon Valley than does San Francisco. And I'm just really getting tired of being the afterthought between San Francisco and Los Angeles. And I'm hoping that when you do discuss the interests of our city, that you make that your top priority. We need those federal, the state dollars going to our local roads, and if you do need signatures, please let me help you get those. Thank you.
Councilmember KALRA.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank both of you for your advocacy on behalf of the city of San Jose, both in Sacramento and in DC, and throughout all the different governmental agencies that we work with and other electeds that we rely upon to help us bring services and improvements in infrastructure to our residents. And I certainly agree that we need to, and this has been a long a discussion for a long period of time, especially those of us who have served on regional agencies, to bring more resources to the South Bay, to Silicon Valley, to Santa Clara County, to San Jose, more so than oftentimes what has been the case, which is San Francisco, East Bay, gets more of the attention. And there's a lot of historical reasons for that, given the fact that those were the population bases for many decades, and we're trying to play catch up. But the reality is, I think, as my colleagues have rightfully stated, we are the epicenter now, especially in terms of population, as well as job growth and opportunity, and I think we have to make sure that we do get our fair share. I do know that I have kept tabs on what our local legislators are doing. I know they're advocating very strongly for us, and I think it needs to be a team effort. We all need to be on the same page. When we had the opportunity to go to Sacramento or work with the leadership group or any other interested party to work with our legislators to make sure that we're getting our fair share going forward. I do want to commend the governor. I think that as opposed to the past couple of administrations, he did the difficult work to get us to right the ship in many ways. And of course, there's still a long way to go, but we haven't seen general fund surpluses in a very long time. He's putting billions more into education, and so I do agree that we have to certainly be cautious of the governor or anyone else in Sacramento trying to siphon funds away from one fund or the other, away from what could go to local services. But I think we do also need to give credit to the governor, I think, for doing a tremendous job during a very difficult time. And so I appreciate the principles and the guiding principles that have been set forth for us going forward. Certainly in my role with VTA, as well as a number of other colleagues of mine, we'll continue to advocate particularly for the transportation funding to ensure that we get our fair share from Sacramento, but also to see what we can do in partnership locally with VTA and the county, other agencies locally, to see what we can do about working together to collaborate in order to ensure that we get resources locally. Thank you.
Councilor LICCARDO.
Thank you. Betsy, thank you for incorporating the comments from the committees. I very much appreciate that. On the issue that Councilmember KHAMIS raised, I certainly strongly agree with his sentiments. And I guess without wanting to slow down the train on these legislative recommendations, I think as we think toward next year, one thing we may want to consider in partnership with our friends at the Valley Transportation Authority is going to the state and asking for direct funding to Santa Clara County by formula from the state, similar to the way it's done in Scandag and in MPOs in the southern part of the state, rather than having it pass through Metropolitan Transportation Commission. I just endured an interesting little battle recently in MTC, in which Santa Clara County, which of course is going to contain 1 out of every 3 households that's added to the Bay Area in the next quarter century, received a pretty paltry share of allocation of cap and trade revenues based on the MTC formula. And I think, we may be needing to get involved at the state level on that very issue as well, because we know that whatever MTC was hoping to get from cap and trade is apparently not in the current plan from the governor. And it seems to me we may at some point just decide we need to bypass those regional authorities and get our dollars directly from Sacramento in the same way that we see down in LA. And I think it's long overdue, given our size and the fact that, frankly, a lot of those regional agencies are staffed by people who live in San Francisco and Oakland, and simply don't believe there are other parts of the Bay Area that are nearly as relevant. And so I think it's something we ought to start exploring now. It's going to be a heavy push, but I think based on what we see in Southern California, it's certainly something that can be done.
Any other comments or questions? I have no request from the public to speak on this. We've had quite a few committee hearings, so that's been worked out. Councilmember Rocha.
Thank you, Mayor. I recall this coming through the committee, and honestly, when it came through, it seems like a century ago, given the holiday break. So I had a question about the medicinal marijuana item that you mentioned, and I see in page 9, section, it speaks to federal drug enforcement and to remove marijuana from Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substance Act. But what about it? I mean, could you expand on that a little bit? Because I was thinking more of getting some clarification on our efforts in trying to manage collectives.
Thank you, Councilmember
And I
Rocha.
can't recall if we spoke about this or not already.
That was added by the council, I want to say maybe 2 years ago. I'm looking at Councilmember LICCARDO because I know you were participated in that discussion. So that was then 2 years ago with regards to that item at the federal level and having it.
Given where we stand, would it be in our best interest to maybe modify what our interest is here as an outcome? I mean, to me, it would be a little bit more than what's listed here.
That's the council's prerogative if you were to.
Well, I mean, I know it has it in front of us here, and that work probably should have been a committee. And given I was on a T&E committee,
No time like the present.
T&E generally doesn't deal with medicinal marijuana, thankfully. But I don't know if my colleagues have an interest in us seeing the language in here a little bit clearer, defined a little bit differently. That would speak a little bit more of what our interests are in getting clarification from the state. Maybe the city attorney's office or the city manager's office might be better suited to come up with some language that might suit where we're going on this matter. I'm looking to staff if they have any thoughts on that.
No, we can certainly work with them on that, work with the staff on that. I mean, we very often sit and work together on proposals and making changes and coming up with language.
So looking at page 9, item number 11, I just don't think that really captures what our best outcome is from whether it's the state or federal level. And I'm sure there's some other outcomes we'd rather see given our struggles with the issue. So I'll stop there. There's one more item, but to continue the discussion on that, I'll pause for a moment.
Okay, Councilmember LICCARDO.
Perhaps I could articulate, and you're specifically referring to paragraph 11 with regard to the removal of marijuana from Schedule 1. Yeah, let me describe at least what the thinking was that motivated that inclusion, at least when I offered it. Currently, because marijuana sits on Schedule 1, it means that it cannot be dispensed by any medical professional for any reason. It has long been belief, certainly my belief and those of others who spend a lot of time studying this issue, that the world would be a better place if we did not have marijuana dispensaries, and instead we had marijuana dispensed by pharmacies with a doctor's recommendation, and that would take care of an awful lot of the challenges we all see in our neighborhoods. by removing marijuana from Schedule 1 and moving it to, for instance, Schedule 2 or Schedule 3, it would then have the status of, for instance, drugs like cocaine and methamphetamine, which we all believe are very dangerous drugs, are highly regulated, but in fact can be dispensed under specific, actually I take that back for methamphetamine, but certainly cocaine and many opiates can be dispensed for medical purposes. And so that is the motivation there, was to try to change the dispensary method. And the only way to do that is by getting a reschedule of the drug.
Thank you. I wasn't questioning the purpose of this or the validity. Is more of, do we want to take it a next step and be a little bit clearer? I mean, we, in some cases, go in front of state legislators and talk to them about the work we're doing and where they can. I've had many assembly members and senators ask me, what can we do to help you? Is there any particular issue? And if we're using this as our guiding principle, I would suggest that we probably expand it to talk a little bit about what our struggles are here and what we're looking to do in our management of the collectives. Councilman LICCARDO, I don't know. Okay.
I agree. Certainly, there's more that could be added. Yeah.
I would like to recommend that when we adopt these, some directions included for staff to come up with an additional guiding principle within this same section that speaks to the work we're doing or trying to achieve here in San Jose.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I did have one additional question.
We have a second to the motions? If we do, okay, we have a motion on the floor. Councilman Rocha.
And then another question I had was and it's along the same path of our efforts on dealing with charter schools and any kind of guidelines from the state around charter schools and minimum guidelines about surrounding uses, size of sites, facilities associated with them. To me, that's another item where we could use some guidance from the state, given that we're kind of operating in the dark on our own. Not to suggest that we shouldn't be pursuing or continuing our work supporting charter schools, but more or less around the guidelines associated with them. So that's another item that I think, again, as we're talking to our state legislators, we're dealing with this issue on a number of occasions and struggling with the issue in all honesty. And I would suggest that we probably use that as another item to talk about when we meet with our legislators. So.
Well, that one, and I suppose the marijuana one is an interesting one, because we have other principals saying we don't want the state telling us what to do. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of both of those cases, it might be helpful if the state were to tell us what to do, although usually when they get around to telling us what to do, we don't like it. So
careful what you ask for.
We have to be careful about what we ask for. Certainly on the marijuana one, life would be a lot simpler if they told us all what the rules were.
Or like in the federal government case, if they tell us what the rules are and then they don't enforce it, it just makes life more difficult. So that's one of the reasons we're in this quagmire.
Yeah, but looking through all these, I was trying to think of some of the issues that we've been working on in the past fiscal year or calendar year, and those are one of the ones that we've struggled a little bit with, and we keep pointing to lack of clarity from other levels of government, and if this is our guiding principle for talking to those individuals, I was a bit surprised for us to not be suggesting that we could use some guidance there. So, thank you.
Councilmember Herrera.
I do support keeping, though, the item 11. I think Councilmember LICCARDO just made a really good point about why that's important, because I think ideally having someone who feels the need for medical marijuana get it through a medical provider, pharmacy, or through this traditional system is the best outcome. So I don't think, while I agree there's probably other things we can add, I want to make sure that doesn't get lost. And is there any update on that? Is there any, what is the federal position on it? I don't, sometimes I'm mystified as to why they're not moving it. I mean, what is the thinking behind why they refuse to move it?
I have no update. A lot of these proposals are sitting on the shelf right now as Congress and administration, White House are dealing with these other issues that I outlined earlier.
Just not front and center.
With regards with the budget, the fiscal cliffs, the shutdowns, all of that has just been a whirlwind of activity in D.C. this past year. And there are other things, too, that I know the council's taking positions on, but they're on hold.
Yes, I mean, I would be interested, for example, and again, I'm happy to have staff work this out, and I appreciate that my colleague didn't specify exactly what the ground, what the changes will be, but it would be great if, for example, county health had the ability to handle medical marijuana. And then that would really negate the need for having these dispensaries. If you had facilities that were already in the providing medical, in the regular chain that could offer that, then that would allow the maybe 5% of the folks that genuinely are medical users of it be able to get what they needed without having to deal with all of the attendant issues that come about from the unregulated dispensaries. The other thing I wanted to say is I really am very supportive of the comments about transportation. I understand it's difficult to achieve it, but I think we should pursue everything, including what Councilmember Liccardo suggested, getting direct funding from Sacramento. We definitely have urgent needs. We have very critical needs, and while the vision of high-speed rail obviously is attractive to a lot of people, I'm really concerned with the transportation structure here and helping people get to and from work, helping commuters utilize the systems we already have, making sure Caltrain's going to be around, and all of the other systems we're going to need as our population continues to grow. So I think transportation is a huge issue, and I am very supportive of the suggestions my colleagues made on that. I had one other thing that certainly isn't necessarily the most top issue. I was just kind of curious about it. The copper wire, looking into copper wire theft and asking, we talked about asking some more regulation from the state, I think. I don't know which item it is in here. I was trying to look for it. But one suggestion I have, and maybe this isn't for the legislature, I think we need to understand what the largest recyclers already do. You know, who's really impacting, who's really in this chain of receiving the stolen copper wire. And so I think it would be interesting if maybe the legislature can take an active role in conducting hearings or something to try to find out how this is happening, because I actually was able to speak to some major recyclers who told me, we're not the target you should be aiming at. It's these lower level recyclers that are not already following a lot of the rules that are in place, and they are just basically shipping it directly to China. It's going to China from there. And I have no idea. I'm not, I haven't done the research on it, but I think this is something we need to really look at, and maybe the legislature is a place that they can start to research that. Thank you.
We have a motion to approve with the one modification. Councilor Rocha, Councilor Oliverio.
Just on the lines of Councilmember Herrera's comments, last year in the legislature passed a bill to tighten regulations on things like copper wire and the redemption, and the governor vetoed it. Does it look like that will come back, or does it look like there's something that would satisfy the governor? He just doesn't want to leave it the way it is.
Part of the dialogue was a repeat of what had been certainly tried before. I do expect that it will be back again, and we can certainly engage more fully on it. We did support a couple of bills, and we're just going to have to work with the governor to convince him.
And I was making the assumption that League of Cities maybe not as officially taken a position, but there's San Jose is not the only city that's experienced this, so it's obviously an issue for other municipalities.
Correct. And this is one where the large cities together could be doing something as well because of the immensity of the problem that we're faced with.
Thank you.
Okay.
We have a motion on that motion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion is approved. Our next item would be 3.4, an ordinance related to electronic campaign disclosure. We have no staff report.
No, it's a cleanup item.
Cleanup item. All right. We have a motion to approve. I heard a motion. Was there a second? And we got a second. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That's approved. Our next item is 3.5, the 2013 Service Efforts and Accomplishments Report. Sharon Erickson and her staff are here to take us through the report.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council members. We're very pleased to present the 6th Annual SEA Report, Service Efforts and Accomplishments for the City of San Jose. SEA reporting contributes to good governance and transparency by providing residents and decision makers with accurate information and independent analysis of city services. Unlike most of our audits, the SEA report offers no recommendations. It's intended to be informational. The report provides cost, workload, and performance data for city services. It includes historical trends, comparisons to targets and to other cities when appropriate and available. It reports the results of city operations for the fiscal year 2012-13, and this time, for the first time this year, it includes 10 years' worth of data for many performance metrics. Our purpose today is to give you an overview of the information in the report and the trends that we're seeing in this year's performance summary. The SEA report summarizes overall expenditures. In 2012-13, the city spent about $1.3 billion on departmental operating expenditures. With nearly 1 million residents, this breaks down to about $1,300 of operating expenditures per resident. For example, as shown on this slide, the police department spent $291 per resident, while the housing department spent about $8 per resident. Some departments are funded by general tax dollars, for example, the fire department. Others are funded by user fees, for example, the airport. I wanted to point out that these figures do not include reserves, transfers, and pass-throughs. The Service Efforts and Accomplishments report includes the results of San Jose's third year of participation in the National Citizen Survey. The survey is a collaborative effort between the National Research Center in Boulder, Colorado, and the International City-County Management Association, known as ICMA. 1,200 San Jose residents received a standard mail survey in September of 2013 and were asked their opinions about the overall quality of life in San Jose and about specific city services. As shown here and on page 6 of our report, 57% of residents rated the quality of life in San Jose as excellent or good, and 65% rated San Jose as a good or excellent place to live. 44% rated city services as good or excellent. The survey also asked residents to rate individual city attributes and services, and we've included those detailed results in our report. In response to 10 consecutive years of budget shortfalls, San Jose has reduced its workforce by approximately 23%, from 7,200 full-time equivalent employees 10 years ago to 5,500 last year. As shown here, the city now has fewer employees per resident than it had in the past and fewer than other large California cities. The staffing and service reductions have hit nearly every city department. Some of the changes include restructuring of services, moving services between departments, or outsourcing. In some departments, staffing decreased by nearly 50%. While the 13-14 budget has restored some positions, the majority of city departments are well below their historic staffing levels. Employee turnover has increased. It reached a high of about 14% in calendar year 2011. As a reminder, the fiscal year 2010-11 was the fiscal year in which the city cut the greatest number of positions. That turnover rate has now dropped to just over 7% in 2013. Calendar years 2010 and 2013 were the first years since 2002 in which more staff resigned than retired. These employees departing resulted in a significant loss of institutional knowledge for the city. The report's arranged alphabetically by department, describing the services the city delivers. The airport chapter starts on page 19 of our report. The airport, as I said earlier, is funded by user fees. 8.5 million passengers used San Jose Mineta Airport in 2012-13. There were significant decreases in both the number of passengers and the number of passenger flights per day compared to 10 years ago. Although regional traffic is the highest it's been in 10 years, San Jose's market share has actually declined from 19% 10 years ago to 13.5% of the regional market last year. Meanwhile, the airport is paying significantly more in debt service due to the completion of the new terminal. Debt service was about $18 million a year 10 years ago. It's now quintupled to $90 million a year. The Office of Economic Development leads the city's economic strategy, manages several incentive programs, and the city's workforce development efforts. OED also oversees the operator of the convention and cultural facilities and agreements for other city and cultural facilities. This chapter is shown on page 33 of our report. As these graphics from our report show, San Jose received less sales tax revenue per capita than most of its neighboring cities, only $137 last year. These figures show that San Jose, in comparison to neighboring cities, is at a disadvantage in funding city services. For example, Palo Alto received 3 times the sales tax revenue per capita as did San Jose. Furthermore, San Jose's unemployment rate was about 8.4%. As shown here, San Jose has less than 1 job per employed resident. In contrast, some other Santa Clara County communities are employment centers and have up to 3 jobs for each employed resident. Next, the Environmental Services Department, which begins on page 37 of our report. ESD provides recycling and garbage services to more than 300,000 residential households in San Jose through contracted service providers. The department also provides wastewater treatment for 1.4 million residents in San Jose and other South Bay communities. Most ESD revenue comes from various customer fees and charges. Less than 1% of ESD's budget comes from the general fund. Utility rates for garbage and recycling, sewers, stormwater, and muni water have all increased significantly over the last 10 years. As shown here, San Jose residents consistently recycle more than they landfill. San Jose residents had favorable opinions of both garbage and yard waste pickup. You will see here on page 47 of our report that the fire department responded to about 55,500 emergency incidents last year in 2012-13, 94% of which were medical emergencies. This map shows the 2012-13 incidents by fire station. The darker red areas show more incidents. 73% of residents rated emergency medical services as good or excellent. The fire department was unable to provide for 2012-13 the response time to emergency incidents. The department advises that it is working to solve long-term underlying issues related to the collection of response time data and the tracking of emergency incidents. In January 2013, the fire department reported inconsistencies in the tracking and reporting of emergency response performance measures. I must say that we do have grave concerns about the department's continuing inability to report response times. The department anticipates that the rate at which response times met the target will be lower than what was reported under the previous calculation. The housing department is shown on pages 53 through 56 of our report. San Jose remains one of the least affordable cities in the country. 4 out of 5 residents rated the availability of affordable quality housing as only good or fair. Because of the dissolution of redevelopment, the housing department lost a revenue stream of about $35 million a year for affordable housing. Thus, you can see on this slide the shrinking pie. The San Jose Public Library is the next chapter. It consists of 23 libraries, including 4 recently constructed or renovated branches that were opened in 2013. In 2012-13, city libraries were open 22% fewer hours than 10 years ago. 10 years ago, branch libraries, excluding King, were open 6 days a week. In recent years, open days dropped to 4 days a week, with limited evening and weekend hours in all branches. Although total circulation remained high, 10.7 million items, including ebooks, it is 25% where it was 10 years ago. A map showing average weekly circulation by branch is included on page 69 of our report. 62% of residents rated library services good or excellent. The city owns 54 community centers. However, due to budget constraints, the Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services Department only operated a dozen of those centers in 2012-13. The list shown here is also shown in larger type on page 75 of our report. The other 42 centers were used by community service providers in exchange for services that primarily benefit residents or by other city programs, for example, Work to Future. This is up from 16 sites 4 years ago. The 10 hub community centers and Bascom Community Center were open 43 to 72 hours per week with limited hours on Fridays and Saturdays. No city-run center had regularly scheduled Sunday hours. 91% of residents reported visiting a park at least once in the last year. Less than a third of residents thought senior services or youth services were excellent or good. Oops. Hit the wrong button. The Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement Department is the next department in our presentation. There it is. The city's permit center is shown on page 77 of our report. It served 32,000 customers in 2012-13. Activity has been on the rise since bottoming out in 2009-10. In 2012-13, the permit center provided more plan checks, more field inspections, and more building permits than 5 years ago. After hitting a low point during the economic crash, the value of permitted new construction is now back where it was 9 years ago. The timeliness of development services, the graph shown at the bottom of this page, reflects the work of the development services partners. That includes the Department of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement, Fire, and Public Works. Development services met or exceeded only 3 of its 7 timeliness targets last year. As you can see from this slide, the police department handled 455,000 emergency calls for service in 2012-13. The response times for Priority 1 calls was 6.7 minutes compared to a target of 6 minutes. Priority 1 calls involve present or imminent danger to life or major property loss. Response times, however, for Priority 2 calls has been increasing and is now at 20 minutes compared to a target of 11 minutes. Priority 2 calls involve injury or property damage or the potential for either to occur. Meanwhile, the number of arrests has fallen to half what it was 5 to 10 years ago. 51% of residents surveyed for the National Citizen Survey rated police services good or excellent. In 2012, there were 3,278 major crimes per 100,000 residents in San Jose. On the upper chart, which is from page 85 of our report, San Jose's crime rate is the darkest blue line. The rate of major crimes per 100,000 residents has historically been in San Jose below the national and state averages. In 2012, San Jose's rate surpassed these national and state averages. Because these numbers drew some questions and attention, we have broken the components down as shown in the graphics at the bottom of this slide. San Jose's rate of major violent crimes per 100,000 residents, the major violent crimes, remains below the national and state averages and below the rates of other major California cities, as shown in the bottom left of this slide. Major violent crimes include homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. As shown in the bottom right graphic and also on page 85 of our report, The increase in crime in San Jose was primarily due to the rate of major property crimes. Major property crimes include burglary, larceny, and vehicle theft. The next department is the Retirement Department. In 2012-13, the city and its employees contributed 100% of their annual required contributions to the retirement funds, and 28% and 43% for the annual required contribution for the federated and police and fire, health, and dental benefits. This is also shown on page 98 of our report. As of June 2013, there were about 5,700 beneficiaries of the plans. This is up from about 3,700 beneficiaries 10 years ago. Over that same time, the number of active members, that is the number of current employees contributing to the plans, has decreased by about a quarter. The ratio of active members to beneficiaries is now less than 1 to 1. 30 years ago, as shown in the graph on the top right, that ratio was nearly 5 to 1. During 2012-13, both plans had positive rates of return on plan assets. Because of the positive investment returns, total plan assets for both of the retirement plans increased from $4.4 billion to $4.8 billion over the prior year. Nonetheless, as of June 2012, the plan's independent actuaries determined that the pension and post-employment healthcare plans' accrued liabilities exceeded the actuarial value of assets by $3.7 billion. This translates to an unfunded liability of about $339,000 per member of our retirement systems. Half of those members are already retired. And finally, the final chapter in our report is the Department of Transportation. It's shown on page 101 of our report. Yes, it is a very long report. San Jose's injury crash rate has declined steadily for years. In 2012, there were 2.7 fatal or injury crashes per 1,000 residents. In 2012, San Jose's streets had a pavement condition index of 63 out of 100, which is only fair. This means that streets are worn to the point where rehabilitation may be needed to prevent them from deteriorating rapidly. San Jose ranked, as shown here, in the bottom 1/3 of Bay Area jurisdictions in terms of our pavement condition index. Only 29% of residents rated street repair excellent or good, one of the worst ratings in San Jose's National Citizen Survey. The pavement condition has been deteriorating due to lack of funds, increasing the need for pothole repairs. In 2012-13, the Department of Transportation filled nearly 20,000 potholes, an increase from just 1,000 10 years ago. Pothole repairs are a corrective maintenance measure. They are not a long-term solution. In summary, the Service Efforts and Accomplishments Report is a once-a-year snapshot of city service levels. It's intended to give a broad overview of the performance of the routine city services that your staff provides year in and year out. When we started this project in 2008, we knew that by now we would have accumulated 10 years' worth of data. This year's SEA report has the benefit of showing those 10-year trends in the city's performance data. But what a 10 years it's been. Painful budget cuts, significant staffing reductions, and cuts to the most basic city services. While fiscal year 2012-13 was a little brighter, for the first time in 10 years, the city had a modest general fund surplus, which allowed some limited staffing and service restorations. The workforce now is much smaller than it was 10 years ago. The remaining staff in every department are working to provide the day-to-day services that San Jose residents expect from their city. Our report includes more detail and performance metrics for all city departments. It's available in hard copy in the back of the council chambers this afternoon from my office, and it's also online as shown here. The results of the National Citizen Survey are attached as an appendix to the report and are also available online. By reviewing this report, we hope that readers will better understand city operations. We hope it provides relevant performance data for the City Council as you make policy and budget decisions on behalf of San Jose's residents. I want to take the opportunity to thank the many departments that contributed to this report. It would not be possible without their support, and of course also to my staff who compiled the information. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions and ask that you accept the report.
Thank you, Sharon, for an excellent report. As you've heard in previous years, we love to see this data and compiled in a way that's understandable to our constituents, and it's always very popular with neighborhood leaders and everybody else who's trying to figure out what's going on in the city. So again, excellent work, and it's good to see 10 years worth of data, because the trend lines are more interesting usually than just the data itself. And I just had a couple of comments. One of these is sort of goes to everything in the report, and that is money. On page 33, you have the graph that shows the sales tax revenue per capita, comparing us to other cities in which we're way below on sales tax revenues, a couple $100 per resident between us and Cupertino, Palo Alto, et cetera, which seems pretty bad. But that's only part of the story, because when you aggregate the property tax revenues per capita, the other general fund revenues per capita, the gap is much wider between the city of San Jose and the cities that have a lot of jobs per housing, much better jobs for housing ratio. In fact, between us and the top of the chart, it's more like $2,000 spread. So enormous difference on per capita revenues that we have to work with, which is part of the reasons why our services aren't as good as some of the other cities. So sales tax is only part of the story, although the others are similarly skewed. I had a question specifically about the housing department. On page 54, we have $23 million of loan repayments and interest earnings. There's a graphic on the right-hand side of the page where funds received. And then we have the expenditures down on the bottom left. It shows $8 million in expenditures. So there's $14 million difference there. So do those go into the other program categories? Because I'm looking at the other funds received, and those all look like things that we get specific money to do specific things. So I just had a question about the housing department budget. I don't know if anybody's here. I see Jackie. How that money flows through. It comes in from repayments and interest earnings. First, is that money that we get to keep, or is the state siphoning off part of that with the redevelopment switch? Yep, get the microphone there, Jackie.
Housing Department.
Okay,
yes, so the majority, 99% of all the Housing Department funds are special funds, and so all of them would go back to the Housing Department. When the redevelopment agency went away, all the Housing Department assets were turned over, as the Housing Department was the successor agency for housing. So if we haven't spent all of that money, we are in the process right now of looking at a couple of developments that we will be moving forward this spring for funding opportunities for more affordable housing. So it all has to come back for its required purpose.
So is that difference between the loan repayments and interest earnings of $23 million and the operating expenditures of roughly $8 million, is that a proxy for about how much money we have to work with for all of our affordable housing needs?
Well, it looks like the operating expenditures are our staffing costs. And then, then anything outside of the operating expense would be funds that we would have available to pay for projects or programs, would be additional funding we could invest.
But it wouldn't go into these other categories because these are specific funds where we get...
Yeah, it would go into specific programs.
Okay. That's all I had on housing. And a comment on planning, building, code enforcement, and development services. On page 81, several graphics about permitting. in the work that's been done, and you rightfully note that staffing in the Planning, Building, Code Enforcement Department has been dramatically reduced over the last few years. And there's a chart sort of in the middle, development services, overall customer satisfaction by project type, that just breaks it out between administrative approval and public hearing. That shows satisfaction dropping over the years. Of course, as staffing dropped, we haven't been able to do as much or as quickly. But I think there's one exception here that's buried in here, that's where the satisfaction level is very, very high. And I certainly want to call that out. In our driving industry companies, those that go through the Special Tenant Improvement Program and the Industrial Tools Program, I've talked to CEO after CEO and been to ribbon cutting after ribbon cutting where they've had great things to say about our staff. And I think that's really important. The council has prioritized driving industry companies as a high priority because we get a multiplier effect for every job created in the tech sector. We tend to get 4 jobs created elsewhere. So that's hidden in these numbers, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the staff has done excellent work over and over again, and I've heard it directly from the people who've been on the other side of the equation, and I hear it almost every week when I'm going to ribbon cuttings and tech sector. So the overall data is interesting, but sometimes it hides some real success stories, and that's one of them, I think. Councilmember, or Vice Mayor Nguyen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Sharon, for another great report. Obviously, for the taxpayers, if they wanted to know where their money is going when they pay their taxes, this is definitely one of the tools that really explain and articulate all the various services that we provide. I just had a couple comments regarding some of the services. The first one is in regards to the business development and job creation on page 33. It states here that more than $2 in tax revenue were generated for every $1 of OED expenditure on business development. This is really good news, and I think that it really goes to show that we should do everything we can to make sure that we help or assist a new business to open its door and start their business, because obviously if they're successful, then we're successful in terms of generating the sales tax revenue. So that's really good. And then, of course, the good news on the library services, with 62% of residents rating the library services as good or excellent, this is a really strong indication that if we decide to go out and seek the extension on the library parcel tax, that we will receive support from voters here in our city. So that makes me more confident that this is something we ought to pursue when the time comes for this discussion to take place. And then the last comment that I wanted to bring up, and that is the increase in the various crimes that took place in our city from this report. And I'm not surprised that robbery and burglary property crimes are definitely on the rise. And I think that this is the right time, this is the year that I hope that my colleagues will consider having a discussion around bringing back or reinstating the robbery unit in the San Jose Police Department. Because of the budget cuts that we had in recent years, we had to eliminate that unit. But obviously, this is something that residents are very, very concerned about, and we've been hearing about this just throughout the city of San Jose, and not just any particular district. We're hearing stories, horrible stories, from more affluent districts like in Almaden, in Willow Glen, and these stories really much, it's the same across the board. And so I think that as part of the discussions in the upcoming budget discussions, we need to talk about how and what we can do to reinstate the robbery unit in the police department. And so those are the comments that I have. Again, thank you for another great report, and we really appreciate all the staff work that had gone into this.
Councilmember Oliverio.
Thank you, Mayor Reed. Sharon, a fantastic job on the report. Your staff's is fantastic, both on the user interface as far as legibility, and then also just the factoids and charts and granulars of what's important. Mayor, at the community budget meeting on Saturday, will this slide deck be presented?
I think we traditionally have hard copies for the neighborhood leaders because they love to have a little take home from that, and I think Sharon's planning to be there as usual.
Okay. I know that the auditors always are present with the pile of these reports on the way out, but I think it does give residents more context to how things are allocated, what the situations are. And I know that as they go through the scenarios, they'll be briefed, but I found this presentation to be very good. And I think it would be good for all San Jose residents. Thank you.
Councilmember Campos.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Sharon. Wanted to start off with fire. On page 50, and maybe it'd be good if, is the chief here or someone from fire here that might be able?
We've got Deputy Chief Juan Diaz.
Okay. So I'm curious about the slide percent of fires contained and civilian fire deaths per million population. On percent of fires contained, we're way off on, containing to the room of origin. Target is 85%. Looks like we're either at 60 or below 60. And then also contained to structure of origin, our target is 90, and not sure where we are on that. It looks like we might be at 90, I'm not sure. But anyway, how much of that is attributed that, we reduced personnel on fire equipment?
Perhaps as Deputy Chief comes down, also note that Deputy Director Ron Dacchioli is here, who might also be able to assist. So between the two of you gentlemen, feel free.
Thank you. As well as if you can, might as well just incorporate the two slides. Deaths, civilian fire deaths have, since 2009, they've gone up, a whole lot. And again, how much of that, if we look at response time and what the target is and where we're at, and the fact that, we did, or the council approved reducing personnel on equipment, how much would we say that attributed to that?
Good afternoon, Juan Diaz, Deputy Chief. Councilmember Campos, to answer that question specifically, we would have to look at each particular death that occurred and see what our response times are. I just don't have that information with me.
Okay. Same thing with containing to room of origin. We would have to look at each individual.
Well, regarding to the room of origin, again, we would have to look at what fires in what portion of the city, what was the response time for the first arriving engine company and the subsequent arriving engine companies. This is just a general data looking at the entire city. I would have to look at all the details on those specifics to be able to give you an answer to be accurate on what you're trying to ask. I just don't
Okay, so perhaps as we start getting into budgets, because I think part of the goal here is to try to be able to get resources where they're needed most in the city. These jump out; they should jump out to all of us as being alarming. That we should be working to get the department to where we can bring these numbers back to where it looks like they were in previous years, where we're able to respond to fires in a timely manner, that the goal is to preserve not just life, but preserve property as much as possible. And I do, if anything to point at, you guys did such a tremendous job preserving that fire and keep the one that just happened a few days ago and keep it on that property, because I know that there were some homes that were lined right next to that, and it's a testament to the work that you all do to contain it to the site. And unfortunately, in some structure fires that doesn't happen, and it seems like it's happening more often now. So that would be good information to be able to get back to us.
We'll be able to look at the most recent reports that we gather and provide that information.
Okay, thank you. And then on...
Councilmember,
yes.
Before we move on, I think either Ron or I wanted to also explain, just in terms of the containment room of origin, the fire department has had some extraordinary data issues, and I just got an email yesterday. The department believes that those numbers actually improved significantly last year. So as we get the data issues sorted out, I think the department will be working hard to get you good, solid information on those issues.
Okay, so these, because this looks like we don't have last year included, right?
Correct.
Okay. So thank you. I wanted to go on to police. I just lost my page. So on page 85, again, in the section of major violent and property crimes and number of arrests, felony and misdemeanors, and status offenders. And if there's someone from PD that might be able to help us understand, or if we're not going to be able to do that today, food for thought to get information back to us. I would imagine, or I would think that there would be a correlation that, one, we don't have enough boots on the ground. We're responding to level 1 calls, which means we're reacting to everything, and the decreased number of arrests of felonies and misdemeanors is resulting to some of these higher crime numbers. Is there anybody here?
I believe we'll need to get back to you, Councilmember.
Okay. Okay, well then, I don't have an answer to that. But it would be good to be able to bring that back to us, along with what Vice Mayor Nguyen was suggesting. At some point we have to make this decision as a council to grow our departments back and to get our folks in our neighborhoods to feel safe again. A lot of them don't, and we need to make sure that we understand that most folks out in our neighborhoods, they're worried about their families. Actually, everyone is worried about their families, and we're supposed to be providing the tools for them to feel safe. And these numbers, as the Vice Mayor brought up, it's not just in East Side, District 5 and 7, that crime is just off the charts. I mean, it's all over the place now, and we need to start getting proactive again. And when we're a proactive department, then we start seeing crimes drop. So thank you. And then lastly, wanted to go back to transportation on page 105. I know that in the graphs, in the graph on page 105, it lists San Jose fatal and injury crash rates. Are these vehicle only or vehicle pedestrian, or is there a chart that would show pedestrian, folks that are getting hit by cars? Because that's something else that we need to really respond to. Thanks, Hans.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm Hans Larson, Director of Transportation. Councilmember Campos, so the numbers in the report in terms of the overall injury crash rate includes all fatal and injury crashes by all modes. So that is something we've had great success the last 20 years in seeing those numbers go down. There are some separate charts that focus on pedestrian and bicycle injury accidents. As well as we provide an annual report to the Transportation and Environment Committee that's focused on transportation safety, and we provide some further details on that topic area. I just want to acknowledge, as has been reported in the media, this last year we did have an increase in the amount of pedestrian and bicycle fatalities. We're working with the police department to do an info memo to the council, just provide some perspectives on that particular issue from this past year. And again, we would expect to have follow-up with the Transportation and Environment Committee as part of our annual transportation safety report.
Okay, I mean, with the one that just happened over the weekend, two of them that happened over the weekend, the one at the Jackson 680 freeway entrance, which we don't count it because it was CHP jurisdiction, but we should count it because it happened in our city. The young, the teenager in front of James Lake High School was just probably one of the most tragic things that could happen to anyone, and it didn't have to happen. And those are things that we should be, again, being proactive on trying to prevent. Even looking at what can we do if it's not having, which we know we can't do, have transportation or traffic police at every intersection. but we could certainly start working with our school districts and, you know, and media to get public announcements out. You know, it's not just people texting and driving that are not paying attention. It's people texting and walking, crossing the street, and, you know, and so forth. I mean, that's just a sliver of what causes distractions, you know, not to mention some of the other things. So that's something, again, you know, as we're going into budgets that we really need to take a look at. Okay, thank you. And again, very good report. Thank you, Sharon.
Councilmember Herrera.
Thank you, and yes, Sharon, thank you so much for this excellent report. As already been said, it is great in its presentation, easy to understand, and I think it will be very valuable to those who are attending our neighborhood budget session on Saturday. So I'm glad that they're going to have an opportunity to get it. On the OED, I'm on page 33. I just want to, I very much support the comments about that OED is well worth the effort, but I still want to say how concerned I am when we look at San Jose's sales tax per capita, you know, which is much less than a lot of our neighboring cities, only $137.12, and looking at Palo Alto at $366. You know, and the fact that we have less than one job per employed resident. You know, so the balance of jobs in housing is still tilted towards housing, as you say in your report. Whereas Palo Alto's got 366 in sales taxes per capita and has jobs to employed residents ratio of about 3 to 1. So part of what we need to do is turn the ship and get more jobs here and change these numbers so that we have a more robust economy with more jobs and more higher paying jobs. It's great that we've raised the minimum wage, but we need to get more jobs in here that pay more so that we can change this. So I think that's it's making sure that we balance our budget, but also that we can create a more robust economy. So I just wanted to thank you for highlighting that. Also on the police report side, I agree with my colleagues. I mean, it is very concerning to me. And as you look at, if we have any doubt in terms of the numbers, if you look at the survey results, people are expressing concern. They're expressing concern about their safety. Although some of the information in the neighborhoods, as you pointed out, because I had a chance to meet with you and your staff, that people do feel a lot safer in their neighborhoods during the day and the evening than they do downtown. Sorry, Sam. They don't feel so hot downtown. But so there is more of a sense of safety there. But I think, you know, the survey information is really important. And, you know, definitely the community is saying something to us on their confidence level in some of the things we're doing, and I think there's lessons to be learned there. One thing I thought was interesting, and I don't remember which chart this is in, but it looked like people were responding more online and using our web-based services and communicating with us in that way, as opposed to watching these televised council sessions or showing up to meetings and talking to elected officials. They are engaging us online, and I think that's a bit of information we need to pay attention to. I'd be interested in the future when we're looking at services analyzing how some of these new techniques like Nextdoor that are being used out in the community, creating more online ability for people to communicate. Are they helping? Are they bringing people together more? The other survey question that concerned me was that neighbors are not as engaged with each other. In some ways they are, but in some ways they don't know their neighbors as well. And that, again, plays into public safety, because neighborhoods that know each other and have those strong relationships, definitely that's a cornerstone of public safety. Could you comment on that a little bit, Sharon? There was a few slides here and they were sort of mixed, but it seemed like there was some sense that they don't necessarily know their neighbors.
And of course, I was looking to see, I wasn't sure what page those results were on. I believe they're, yeah, I had just turned, thank you, Mandan. I had just turned to page 7. So on the bottom of page 7, we're seeing the results here. So
I was kind of looking in the back with all of you. Had a lot of different ones in the back.
Yeah, so the graphic is shown there on the bottom of page 7 of the report. It shows that
somewhere around probably 12% of neighbors talk to their immediate neighbors every day. Somewhere close to another 20% report they talk to their neighbors several times a week. By the time you get up to several times a month, it's actually the majority of neighbors are reporting that they do talk to their neighbors several times a month.
I know what I wanted to ask you. You have a comment up here at the top of that, in sense of community. The overall sense of community in San Jose is fairly low, with just 37% of residents reporting a sense of community as good or excellent, and 19% reporting it as poor. How do you, what's your comment on that, or how important?
I think my job as your auditor is to report the numbers, and in some ways, I think a politician is better equipped to report on how important that is. Obviously, those are numbers we would want to see increased. So those are the kind of numbers that I think it's important that we track every year through this tool of the National Citizen Survey, to watch what's happening with residents and to see if we can move those numbers up.
The reason why I say mixed is it looks like the people are interacting, but then the comment is there's not a strong enough sense of community. So yeah, I'd be interested, I guess, in the tools that would help increase that, and as we move forward. The last thing on the police is I sit on the Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force, and we were able to hear numbers for 2013. And fortunately, those numbers look much better. We saw decreases across the board in violent crime and other things. So 1 year doesn't make a long-term trend. 6 months don't make a long-term trend. But it's certainly better. It's certainly more comforting to at least see that some of those numbers are going down, subsequent to this report. And that was good to hear. So hopefully that trend will keep on going in this year, and we'll see some more improvement.
If I could, council member, point out on page 85, the chart on major crimes in the bottom left-hand corner, that's what we see when we see 10 years worth of data, where the levels are pretty consistent when you look overall, and then all of a sudden last year you saw a spike. And what we don't know is if that's the start of a trend or if it's a one-year spike. So in looking at this data, it's important to look at these trends and compare it to previously. Sometimes we talk about the difference between 10 years ago and last year, but at the same time, when you look at these trends, you see there was a one-year jump, and that's what we need to address. And at this point, hopefully that was a spike, and those numbers will decrease in the coming year, in which case last year would stand out as a sore thumb in any future reports.
Well, this is 2011 and 2012 we're looking at, right?
Yes.
2013 is not on here.
Correct.
And what I'm saying is I heard numbers from 2013 last year,
right,
January to May, that showed significant improvement.
Right.
So I hope that those trends continue. And the other thing is, why do we put the violent and the property crimes together when it's sort of skewed? It's kind of. I'm just wondering why we do that.
That's been the way that San Jose has reported crime rates, and that's been the performance measure for many years. This year, when we saw the jump, all of a sudden there was a large jump. That's when we realized we need to disaggregate these numbers.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor KALRA.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the report, Sharon, and some comments on following up on some of the comments that have been made by my colleagues, in terms of the increase in traffic incidents and so on. I don't think it's surprising, just given the environment we're in, the fact that our traffic enforcement unit is not the same, performing the same functions as it previously was, and we don't have the resources to allow it to do so, and just the fact that our police staffing has been so low that the focus has been not just on patrol, but patrol responding to priority 1 and 2, which essentially means that it's not going to happen overnight, but over a period of 1, 2, 3 years, people are just getting pulled over less. They're seeing less of a presence of police in the community, and that's slowly going to increase those that may, slide through a stop sign or run through a red light and so on, and so or speed, escalate their speed another 5-10 miles per hour. And I think that's really what we're seeing is just a lack of general responsiveness due to resources, and so it's not surprising that we're seeing the increase, and I've seen some articles or discussions about it, kind of people trying to figure out why it's happening. It's not surprising to me, and it's certainly something that I think speaks to the overall general level of services and resources we have, both in the police department as well as DOT and what have you. Thankfully, we increased the amount we have, at least for doing some traffic calming measures, which I think will be helpful in some of the neighborhoods, but it's not going to do anything to deter folks that just generally are seeing less of a presence and so feel they can get away with more than they may have in the past. In terms of the policing numbers, I think it comes down to staffing and the decrease in staffing, and certainly I know we're going to, one of the areas of crimes that continues to rise and stay at a high level is property crimes in the neighborhoods, as we've essentially defunded our burglary unit over the years. Have certainly made efforts to try to have the council fund it, and I think we're seeing the consequences of not having that targeted action, instead having to kind of be in a position where the chief has to put all the resources in patrol because of the lack of staffing. And I'm sure I look forward to essentially, especially during an election year now, to have folks jumping over each other to try to re-establish the burglary unit, and I'll be happy to sign on or support. Don't need to get credit for it as long as we see it happen, that we get that burglary unit and other investigative units back in place and do our best to shore up the police department. But it's going to come down to the ability for us to keep our officers here in San Jose and recruit and retain officers here. And with the fire, the response of fire, particularly when it comes to, the room of origin versus structure of origin. When it comes to fire and police responses, every year during the budget season when we have the police chief and fire chief here, I've asked for several years now very direct questions based upon the actions that the council has been taking. You can go back and look at the tape with Chief McDonald, Chief Moore, other folks from the command staff of both the police and fire department. Been very specific. We're very clearly asked, are our actions by having been put in a position and forced to change our policy to restricting fires to the structure of origin rather than room of origin, or because of staffing reductions or brownouts, what have you, in the fire department, or because of staffing level reductions and choices that the police department's been forced to make, very specifically asking, are we going to see more of a loss of structures? Are we going to see more loss of life? And in every instance, the police and fire department chiefs or their command staffs have answered very clearly yes. And so none of this should be a surprise. What's been happening in the city and the increase in crime, the increase in number of structure fires, the deaths due to them, although would need more analysis on a case-by-case basis in order to determine what the actual cause was in a particular case, the trend is obviously going to go up, as was foretold to us by our very own police and fire chiefs. And based upon the decisions we've made and the budgets that we've put forward based upon different priorities that we've had, and as I've always believed that budgets certainly are fiscal documents, but they're also moral documents that speak to the values that we hold most dear. And I hope that this year public safety is finally given the highest priority above all else. Thank you.
Councilor Rocha.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, staff, for the report. I had a question on page 57, 58, the Human Resources Department. And I guess it's a two-part question. One is for you, Sharon, and the other is for the city manager. I'll start with the city manager. The workforce management plan, I think this term was that the department's undertaking. What's the status of that?
All right, we are still in the works on putting together what we're calling our workforce support and development strategy. There have been drafts put together. We're still putting together the teams that will do some of the follow-up work that will help put that into motion.
So initially it was potentially at the end of the year, and now what are you looking at in terms of returning to council?
Let's see. Well,
or Rules Committee, I can't recall what it was.
Yes, I think we could provide a status report fairly short order. It took a little more time to put together the initial report, and again, we're doing more discussion among staff in order to put together the people that will help implement different pieces of it. So I would say
February, March.
I would put it in February to get the status report back to the committee.
Okay. So the status report, is there a final? I didn't recall a two-part approach to this.
Well,
Maybe I forgot. It's been quite some time.
We're looking at this as an ongoing effort, and so as a result, not a specific council action, quite frankly, because it is a number of items that many of which are already underway, and really putting more of a comprehensive perspective around individual elements and everything from recruiting to training, succession planning, and the like.
Thank you, because I see that report or document is pretty, well, it's related to a number of different issues here that a number of us are talking about, whether it's response times, whether it's performance, whatever the case may be. So I had a question for you on the 93 days time to hire. Is that from the original posting or from the offer being made to the individual starting?
I'm looking to Michael Houston from my
Thank you.
Michael Houston, auditor staff. Yes, that's 93 days is the span of time from the posting to fill the position.
And that was an average of the entire workforce over the last calendar year?
That's correct.
Not fiscal year, or is it fiscal? I didn't know how you folks, wait, that's 2012-13?
No, actually, that's fiscal year.
Okay, so that was through June, 93 days average.
That's correct.
Do you know of an industry standard average for public sector versus private sector? I know you wouldn't have been prepared to, just curious.
I'm not aware.
Do you know what this compares to last year? And I could have done that research, I'm sorry, but no, that's all right. I can do that myself. Thank you. The other item I had was the 410 new hires. Now, I'm looking at the second paragraph. The department posted 269 jobs. And then the next sentence is the full-time hires was 410. Can you help me reconcile the two? It's probably an obvious confusion on my part, but I don't understand how.
It's multiple hires for one position.
So the posting listed,
So
whether
you
it's
post
police
for
department,
police
officer, gotcha.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Councilor KHAMIS.
Sharon, as usual, you did a great job with this report. I really enjoyed reading it. I did have I did have to take a double take on the 49% decrease in arrests because we haven't had a 49% decrease in our force. I'm wondering, there's no breakdown of the types of arrests that were made, because I know with the decriminalization of marijuana, we probably were making less arrests when it comes to drug possession and drug use. I mean, if you can walk down the streets of San Jose today and smell it in the air, so to speak, I don't think people are pretty much smoking it openly, and I don't see anybody getting arrested for it anymore. Do you think that could account for the 49% decrease?
No, we don't have a breakdown of those numbers. You have to get that from the police department.
Okay. All right. Well, and again, I want to thank you very much for a very, very easy to read report, and thank you for your analysis.
Councilor KALRA.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a follow-up on that comment. The state level, personal possession of marijuana has essentially been decriminalized to an infraction, and as we know, our police department we don't have the resources to be focused on infractions. I think, and I believe the police command staff would agree that the dramatic decrease is the lack of the ability to do proactive policing, where you see an enormous amount of arrests are made out of the time that officers have to patrol and make proactive stops, and whether they be pedestrian stops or vehicle stops. Our police department just does not have the capacity to do that anymore, and I think that's where we're seeing a dramatic decrease. And the reason why it's more than the percentage of the department that we lost in terms of patrol officers is that since they're focusing more on priority 1 and 2 arrests take a lot longer, just time-wise, during the course of a shift to deal with. And so just in terms of the amount of time that an officer's on a shift, their arrests are going to go down dramatically by not doing proactive policing and by having to deal with much more exhaustive arrest processes for the arrests they are making.
Councilmember Liccardo.
Sharon, again, great job by you and your team. Thank you for presenting this in such a easy to read and understand format. I had one question, though, about city expenditures, because I know this is often the subject of debate and discussion. On page 11, we've seen this pie chart before in the city manager's budget documents. But as you can see, citywide expenses, for instance, in that pie chart, consume 26% of the budget. And I imagine some of those citywide expenses could probably be broken down by department. For instance, some significant amount of the time spent by Rick's staff, the city attorney's office, we know is dedicated to police cases. And we know some of it obviously would be much harder to break down because your team is dealing with many departments. Has anyone tried to break down that citywide number so we can at least get a better sense of how we're really allocating the dollars in the city?
I'm smiling because it's been an ongoing discussion between my office and the budget office. So you are correct that in the citywide portion, the advice I would give to you, if I could, is in the citywide portion of the budget document, there is a citywide portion. That includes expenditures that could be interpreted to be directly related to a department.
Right.
So police department workers' compensation costs.
Right.
That kind of thing may show up in citywide. So citywide.
And I agree, I see it there. I just never see it actually reflected in one.
Yeah, so in the budget document, you're going to see the city attorney's office, you're going to see the police department, then you're going to see this citywide category, and it is a specific group. They are listed in the budget document. So keep your eye on that list. The budget office has been working to minimize the amount of expenditure that is in that. I think as we started reporting out expenditures by department and talking about the cost per unit of service, we've been working with them to move as many of those expenditures on a budgetary basis into the departments as they can.
Right. And I appreciate that effort because I think it lends transparency and clarity to how we're making decisions and whether they're really reflecting the priorities of our residents. I guess let me just offer a suggestion to the extent that we are not able, and I think through nobody's fault, but we are not able to further refine that citywide number, that we present something that would reflect the pie without citywide data and simply include departmental expenditures that we're able to actually identify. So that way, when somebody asks what percentage of our dollars are going to X services, we can respond in a way that's closer to the truth. Is that something that you might be willing to consider?
We will definitely consider it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I had a couple of things that came to mind while we were going through this to go back over a little bit. On the crime stats pages 84 and 85, there was a report recently done by the Public Policy Institute of California that tracked realignment and the change in the state's prison population and concluded there was robust evidence that changes in incarceration caused by realignment have increased property crimes, especially motor vehicle thefts, which of course are reflected in our numbers as well as other numbers around the state. And interestingly enough, they conclude no increase in violent crimes can be attributed to the realignment, or at least not statistically significant. And so I know other cities are seeing their property crimes go up. So when we compare ourselves to the California average, is that average also moving up? And is there a lag time? I know crime stats get reported in a lot of different ways and a lot of different times, and I'm never quite sure if the time periods are the same or not.
Yeah, so the lag time on the numbers we're using are the numbers that are reported to the FBI and by the FBI in aggregate. So those numbers are for calendar year 2012. Yeah, the numbers we looked at that we broke down this year were for for the year 2012. So we compared ourselves to the statewide average for 2012. I don't have those numbers broken out over time. We could do that.
Okay, well, it does look like that the California average is moving up on the graph on page 85. So anyway, there's some fluctuations in these numbers all the time, but clearly our numbers are moving up, and that's of concern to us. And it really doesn't matter what the cause is of the increased property crimes. It's more work for our department, and we don't have enough officers to do all the work we want them to do. And that's clear, and we've made clear as a council that we want to get the department back up to full authorized staffing and increase the numbers so they can deal with property crimes as well as the others. Having other people in the same condition doesn't make it feel any better that we're having the increase in crimes. One more thing, just looking across the book in various sections, a couple interesting things. If you look on page 10, total city revenues over this 10-year period up by about $300 million, according to the graph there. And then flip the page to city staffing in the same time period, down from roughly 7,200 to 5,500 employees. Well, we know that our staffing has decreased, and you can see that in the per capita staffing or any other measure of staffing that you want. We are at best lightly staffed compared to other big cities. It plays out, interestingly enough, in the police and fire departments because that's where we have put most of our money. You can see both in the police department and fire department that on page 48 for fire and page 84 for police that the budget in those departments, the funding has gone up, and yet staffing has gone down. And, that's all a result of cost increases and primarily the retirement costs. So over that 10-year period that I referred to on page 10 when we had a $300 million increase in revenues, I don't have the data here, and maybe it's in the book and I missed it, but the retirement costs during that period went up by somewhere around $150 million to $170 million or something. I just can't do it from memory. So obviously we put a lot of money into retirement costs that we would have liked to have put into staffing, but we weren't able to. Hopefully we'll get control over those retirement costs and we can see the staffing increases that we all talk about and want, because you can't increase the robbery unit or the burglary unit without more officers, I don't think. And so that's, I think, our task is to get more officers so we can fully staff the department and then increase the staffing. Any other questions or comments from the council on this? The action would be to accept the report, I believe. We have a motion to do so. No cards from the public on this. Okay, we have a motion to accept the report. On that motion, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Excellent report. We'll see you Saturday morning. I'm sure the neighborhood association leaders will look forward to getting the report. We'll move now to item 3.6, an audit of code enforcement. We just happen to have the city auditor available. Sometimes the Rules Committee gets it right. 2 for 1 today.
Yes, as we try and get staff in place here, Sharon Erickson, City Auditor again, we'd like to present today our audit of code enforcement. With me in the box, I have Gitanjali Mandrakar and Erica Garafo from my office who worked on this audit, Diane Buchanan and Jamie Matthews from Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement. We concluded that improvements are possible, but resources are significantly constrained in this audit. Sorry to be the bad news person today. The Code Enforcement Division of the Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement Department provides citywide enforcement service for all reported concerns and violations related to neighborhood residential properties, as well as commercially and industrially zoned properties. The budget and staffing for this function has been significantly impacted by citywide budget cuts. The objective of our audit was to review and assess the efficiency and effectiveness of code enforcement operations and the consequences of those recent reductions. Our first finding was that additional tools may be needed to ensure timely resolution of general code cases. Code Enforcement's General Code section provides the first response to basic neighborhood habitability and building safety issues. Code Enforcement eliminated most of its proactive enforcement programs, and since 2010-11 no longer responds to some types of routine complaints. For those cases that it still responds to, the response time, that is the time to first inspection, has declined. It's now at 27 days to the first inspection. Code Enforcement does frequently visit properties more than once, often multiple times, to ensure compliance has been achieved. One issue that we identified is that the department has not always charged for property reinspection fees. In fact, very few property reinspection fees were charged. In our opinion, Code Enforcement should review its options to respond to routine complaints that are currently not receiving any response beyond a letter, including hiring more staff when funding becomes available. Furthermore, Code Enforcement should develop criteria for when properties should be vacated, those extreme cases, should charge for re-inspections, as I mentioned earlier, and that's just in accordance with its policy, and then consider issuing misdemeanor citations to further ensure compliance. Our second finding was that efficiencies are needed to improve the multiple housing program. The multiple housing program, just to remind you, is a citywide proactive program to inspect rental multiple housing units. About 41% of San Jose residents are renters. Many of them live in buildings with 3 or more rental units and are therefore covered under this program. Owners of those rental properties are required to obtain a residential occupancy permit. Code Enforcement used to inspect these properties more frequently, but is now on a 6-year cycle to complete inspections. Our review found that various city departments also oversee some of these buildings. We can improve the coordination of information and inspections between those departments. We did find some duplication, some properties that may not have been inspected, for example, either by Code Enforcement or the fire department. In addition, we recommend Code Enforcement modify the 6-year cycle to inspect offending properties more frequently and non-offending properties potentially less frequently, prioritize the remainder using a risk-based approach, and charge applicable reinspection fees. About 52% of the workload in the multiple housing unit is reinspections. Our third finding was that technology improvements are needed. Code Enforcement staff routinely use at least 3 databases which do not talk to each other. We recommend Code Enforcement review options for replacing or enhancing its databases, including options for mobile units and interfacing with other city databases. Our fourth finding was about CDBG funding. This is Community Development Block Grant funding, which was set aside for Code Enforcement. Code Enforcement, because of staffing vacancies, was unable to spend $2.6 million of CDBG funds since 2007-08. Those funds were spent elsewhere in the city. They were put to good use, but Code Enforcement was not able to use them. We're recommending that Code Enforcement work more closely with the Housing Department to improve the budgeting process and determine if unexpended CDBG funds can be rebudgeted. And our fifth finding concerns the abandoned cart program. It is far below cost recovery. It is intended to be 100% cost recovery. It only collects about $30,000 of the $113,000 in current costs of the program. We do believe this is an extremely valuable program where the city is simply picking up the carts. We have streamlined the process. The city picks up the carts, takes them to the central service yard. The program is working very well. It should be cost recovery. We recommend the administration review the feasibility of increasing the number of participating companies and/or increasing the annual fee. With that, I'd like to thank the staff in the Code Enforcement Division for their time and insight during the audit process, and to thank them for the the job that they do. It is a tough job in this city, but one that is vitally important to our residents. Our report includes 22 recommendations to help staff improve their operations, but it should be noted that staff, while we did point out some potential efficiencies, this program is under significant budget and staffing constraints. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the administration for the response that's shown on the yellow pages of the report.
Hi, I'm Diane Buchanan, Deputy Director for Code Enforcement, and we'd like to start off by thanking the auditor and her staff for all of their hard work and professionalism they exhibited during the audit process. And we value the time that they spent with us, getting to understand our challenges, complexity, and importance of our services. As we stated in our written response, we understand and agree with all of the audit findings and have set a goal to have all 22 recommendations implemented within a 12-month period. We have already woven the recommendations into our strategic work plan, and of the 22 recommendations, we have already implemented 5 of them. Recommendations 6 and 14, I'd like to note that recommendations 6 and 14 have been implemented as mentioned in the memo from the mayor and council members Campos and Rocha. While other recommendations will require council and/or budget approval, we will seek those during the budget process this coming year, including a request for additional staff to restore inspection services. Again, we'd like to thank the auditor and her staff for their time, and we're available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, and congratulations on your promotion. I think if we had money, we'd just like to increase your budget by a whole bunch and put back all the code inspectors and people that you've lost over the last 5 or 6 years. Unfortunately, you have to stand behind the police department, the fire department, and wrestle with the other departments for additional personnel. So we're struggling, I know, to do all of the work and not getting done nearly what you want to do or what we would like for you to do, but we do appreciate the fact that a lot of work gets done. And it is, as the auditor mentioned, a very important to our city, not just some neighborhoods, but all the neighborhoods. Obviously, some neighborhoods more than others. And it's good that we've been having some extra funds to be able to do things, but it's not enough, and we would certainly like to do more. Councilmember Campos.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, staff, for the presentation, and Sharon for the audit, another excellent audit. A couple of questions. Getting back to CDBG, and I know Sharon had given a recommendation on, how to, since there's unexpended funds there, and these were specifically to place-based strategy neighborhoods where, one, you really don't want to bite off more than you can chew, and these are neighborhoods that have a lot of needs, and it seems like maybe this is something you can't answer, but perhaps housing can come down and answer. Is there any restriction on not being able to extend the time that we have these neighborhoods as these place-based strategy neighborhoods so that they can, get the full effect of the intention of trying to bring in more resources to help deal with some of the code issues and issues that they're dealing with?
Sure. I'm Jackie Morales-Frand with the Housing Department. The CDBG funds are restricted in terms of time and when they must be spent, so we can't carry forward unspent dollars without creating longer-term problems. So the majority of the funds that weren't spent were actually unspent during the time before we implemented the place-based areas. Okay. But again, it's really important in order to keep our timeliness and our spending appropriate, that we actually spend the funds the year that we're given them and not carry them forward.
So then, is there a way to get creative, staying within the parameters of HUD? Because I know that HUD has a lot of restrictions, to be able to accomplish our goals there?
There are certainly ways. We have talked to code about how can we work together to ensure if there are particular areas when we do have available funding to see if we can allocate more there. So we will continue to work with them to see if there are upcoming opportunities.
Okay, thank you. Then the other one, just as a recommendation, I know that there's been a lot of use with the graffiti the smart app that they use so residents can report graffiti. Has there been any thought of incorporating something similar for general code enforcement issues?
We've looked at different vendors, and we're hoping with a new computer system, that will be part of one of the tools we'll be able to use. And folks can report over the internet now, and something along the lines. We've looked at their vendor to see if we can use them, but we need it tied in to be able to tie into our computer system. The system we use now came off the shelf in 1998. We're barely holding it together, and so we're, along with our other two divisions, building and planning, looking at a new permitting system for the whole department.
Okay, so that would be new technology and
Correct.
so forth. Okay, well, that takes care of my last question. So thank you. With that, I would like to motion to approve the memo authored by Mayor Reed, Councilmember Rocha, and myself, approving the city auditor's report with the indicated outline directives. Since I came onto council, I've worked with the residents in my district, in particularly Colmar, Virginia, Sunset, Poco, trying to take care of some of these outstanding just nuisance issues. And when you have absentee landlords, it becomes that much more harder to deal with. So, hence the recommendations in the audit. But again, thank you for the report. And, we just need to stay up on this. And I think the first time I met you, Diane, is when I was working in Santee, and what you guys did at Santee was amazing. That was in the early 90s. And, these absentee landlords had no other choice but to be responsive to us. And if there's a way we can get back to that, I think we can make some huge impacts. So thank you.
Vice Mayor Nguyen.
Thank you, Sharon and your staff. Thank you again for another great report. I don't have any questions. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Diane and your team, Jamie Matthews, for just incredible work that you guys are doing in the community. As the mayor alluded to, you have very limited budget and very limited staff, and a lot of the costs that we receive, at least that I receive in my office, besides issues that relate to public safety, it's all around code enforcement, because your department deals with quality of life issues, and obviously residents, that's what they're concerned with. And I'm just really grateful for the great responses that you guys have given us in responding to the residents who made these calls. So great work, keep it up. And like the mayor said, we wish we have more money, because this is a department that I definitely would like to allocate more funding if we have additional funding that we can allocate to. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Herrera.
Thank you. Sharon, thank you for the report. Thank you for focusing in on some of the tools that if we can, we can make some of the changes. Obviously, I wish we had a lot more budget, but in the absence of that, at least shining a light on some of the things we can do to make changes, I think is really helpful. And I appreciate my colleague's memo. This is really good. Really appreciate you talking about NC highlighting the recommendation to amend the Muni Code to allow the issuance of misdemeanor citations. So in my area, I'm concerned about the most egregious problems. We continue to hear about these, and the residents refer to them as drug houses that are just continuing problems, and some that just keep existing have been around since I've been in office, and code enforcement ends up dealing with them, the police department ends up dealing with them. So anyway, I'm hoping that this misdemeanor citation can help with those. I don't know that it will, but hopefully giving you guys another tool so that you can work with the police department, hopefully that will help. I agree with Vice Mayor that this is one of the areas that really the public is aware of and asks us to help. And so I think this is a service we need to pay a lot of attention to. The only thing I wanted to mention is I really like the auditor's suggestion about the shopping carts. I think that's a relatively, at least it seems to me, kind of straightforward proposition where we could expand that program a little bit. It seems to be working really well with the larger stores, so I'm interested in seeing if we can expand that out, because it's great for the stores, great for us, great for the residents. So it's another, again, obvious thing that we might be able to do to make things better. Thanks.
Councilor LICCARDO.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Sharon, for the report, and thank you, Diane, for the response and the hard work of your team. I just had a couple questions, one relating to recommendation number 5. I'm thrilled to hear that that is among those being recommended by my colleagues with regard to issuance of misdemeanor citations. And am I right in hearing, Diane, did you say that's one of the ones that had been implemented already?
No.
No, not yet.
Six
Okay.
and 14.
So with regard to number 5, I recognize that takes some work probably with Rick's office, but it would probably help greatly if we're going that direction. I hope we do, that we have some post-like training. Post, as you know, is the certification process that police officers go through for testifying, because you're going to have litigation, and if it gets to a misdemeanor level, you're definitely getting litigation, and that means you want code enforcement who are comfortable being on the stand, understanding how to answer questions well, and obviously everybody tries to tell the truth. The problem is a witness who tries to tell the truth who doesn't do a very good job explaining when they don't know the answer, or fumbling around with reports and that kind of thing. It really undermines the ability to make these cases work. And so I hope that can be incorporated somehow.
Thank you for the comment. Our inspectors, once they pass probation, do go through post-training.
Oh, they already do. That's great.
And we continue, that's a continuing training that we do with all of our inspectors.
Wonderful. Great. Good to know you're way ahead of it. With regard to all the issues around technology, and there seem to be many, I was surprised to hear that there's no mobile application right now being used by inspectors. I recognize we're all dealing with legacy systems and very outdated technology here. But between that and recommendation 16 and then the recommendation 18 around a web-based complaint form, all which I think would, to all of us, would seem very intuitive that, gee, we should have had that 5 years ago. How far off are we? What does the cost look like? What does the timeline look like to get those kinds of basic technologies in place that could significantly reduce the time that your team spends, I'm sure, doing a lot of operations manually that could be very readily automated?
The web-based complaint form will be online Friday.
Fabulous.
When we changed systems, it didn't, web browsers, it didn't come with it. And
Great.
that'll be done Friday.
Okay.
As far as the complete overhaul of the system, it's a
Joe's back from the
budget
dead.
item for the full department.
Like Freddy Krueger.
We've issued a request for information for replacing our permitting system, so that's out circulating right now. Our goal with that is to get back from a couple of vendors what they can do for us and some basic pricing so that we can move forward with the procurement. We've got the dollars set aside. We've started building some of the staffing on the technical side to do that, so we're off and running on it, but it's probably realistically 2 years away before it'd be live. So the question is there something that we want to do in the meantime that's kind of bubblegum baling wire? And we did look at the graffiti app. I do 200 a year with just that. And could we connect it even just to have it come into the office to our call center staff to manually transcribe it? So that's one of the things we've talked about, but we haven't pulled the trigger on that.
Okay. I recognize these are complicated, challenging issues dealing with very old systems. And I know I have absolutely no expertise in this, but from my limited efforts to get mobile systems launched in various endeavors in which I've been involved, even going with off-the-shelf Salesforce, Nation Builder type software with a clear mobile application, at least as a bridge until you can get the whole system up, I think would do wonders for productivity of those code enforcement inspectors who are out there gathering everything in manual and writing, and then somebody has to assume translate it into a database, and I just can't imagine how much more efficient we could be.
Well, we just finally deployed this year for the inspectors, or the end of 2013, so they all now have smartphones. So we're building that infrastructure so that we're able to do some pieces that some of our inspectors have come from agencies that used smartphones as a way to kind of tag information and just kind of how the graffiti app, but you can do a lot with that.
Right.
So we are putting that infrastructure out there to do it. It's just kind of, do we deploy kind of one more piece sooner or not? And that's the piece we still need to talk a little bit more about.
Okay. Thanks, Joe.
I have one request from the public to speak. We'll take that now. Russ Signorino.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as you can see, I was sitting a little closer so I wouldn't take up too much of your valuable time. But what I want to talk about is first of all, I want to tell you how proud I am of our fire department, including our police department. And I use the word our. They are our fire department. And especially right now, they have this taxing problem of an arson going around San Jose and doing some dirty work, and I hope they catch this person soon. Now, the other thing I want to bring up is bicycle riding on our streets. I have in my pocket a California driver's license saying that I took the test and that I am okay to drive on the streets of San Jose or any streets in the state of California.
Russ, this is a hearing on
I
code
know, I'm
compliance.
talking about code enforcement.
Okay.
I'm getting there. I go a little bit around, as you well know, probably. But nonetheless, I'm talking about safety equipment when people get on the streets, and I'm talking about bicycle riding, that they wear safety vests. I know some of you ride bicycles here. I don't know how many of you have safety vests, and I doubt if any of you have any, but I think that's something you should start getting into and set it a good example. Now, you saw those young babies up there who pledge allegiance to our flag. Those are the ones we have to protect. Those are the ones we have to keep in mind, that when we make code enforcement to help them get through our traffic street, then these are the people. And I think that's important that we start looking at that, and you could be with the first city in the whole city of the country, in the United States, to say, yes, we take safety first, and our people should wear, and somehow or another, if we have to donate them, and people that can't afford them, that have large families, maybe we can get some big companies to donate these safety vests to these food banks and so on, and distribute them that way. And those, I'm speaking about the ones that cannot afford it. And I urge you, please look at
Your time is up.
I'm going right now, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, it's over.
I'm being
2
kicked
minutes.
off.
Yes,
2
you are.
minutes. I got it. 2 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your consideration.
You never did get around to code enforcement,
What's
but
that?
too late. You never got around to code enforcement, just too late. You used your time. I try to help you. We have a motion to approve on that motion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That's approved. We'll move now on to item 4.2, amendments to Title 20 of the San Jose Municipal Code zoning ordinance. Joe Horbital is going to lead the staff presentation, I think. Or it might be Laurel.
Laurel's
Pavetti.
got this one.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Laurel Pavetti, Assistant Director for Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement. The item before you today is an ordinance proposing 3 major areas of change to our municipal code dealing with land use and planning. This is another in a series of code changes for your consideration that help us implement our new general plan and align our zoning code to that bold vision. First of all, we're looking at increasing mixed use within our city to facilitate our urban villages. We're doing this without adding a new zoning district, but rather amending an existing zoning district that's called commercial pedestrian. Second, we would like to expand the opportunity for urban agricultural uses also within our commercial zoning districts. We're looking at allowing farming activities on parcels of about 1 acre in size. You may hear testimony today to increase that to 3 acres. We believe 1 acre is sufficient for a city of San Jose's size because we, again, want to protect our opportunities for job growth within our core commercial areas. And third, we're creating a new zoning district called public quasi-public. This is intended to facilitate those important community-serving uses in our community like churches and schools, other places of worship, etc. Specifically, the addition of this new zoning district adds flexibility and choices. It adds choice to our charter schools, it adds choice to our public schools, and certainly also to our private schools by way of example. With this ordinance, we are not rezoning anybody's private property. So this is just installing the rules for future land use. We're not changing anyone's zoning with this action. And then simply, we just want to remind the council that there already are requirements in state legislation pertaining to schools. We also would like to streamline the ability for schools and certain other assembly uses to get through our permitting process. For this reason, the staff are recommending a special use permit for those properties that have both a general plan designation of public, quasi-public, and zoning district of public, quasi-public, that they would go through a streamlined process called our special use permit. That's a hearing that's held by our planning director. The Planning Commission disagreed with us. They would prefer that those uses continue to have a conditional use permit that is heard first by them and then on appeal by you. So that's probably the major policy difference between your planning staff and Planning Commission. And with that, we're available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. I want to thank Laurel, Joe, and the Planning Department staff who can continue to work on the zoning code. Anybody who's tried to read the zoning code knows it's a big, big project to make these changes, and we've been doing it, I think, quarterly for a long period of time. I know it's a lot of work, but it helps us align our zoning with our general plan goals and all the other things that we're trying to do, particularly with economic development or permit streamlining that we all like to see, and adding some flexibility for employment uses. So I think this is a good one. I guess I disagree with the Planning Commission. I think I would go with staff recommendation on how to process, because we are trying to streamline the process, and that's a step that we can do to use the use permits as well. All right, Councilor KHAMIS.
Well, I have to admit that I was overwhelmed by this report, and I thank your staff for getting back to me and educating me on it. And I really appreciate the proactiveness of trying to streamline our code so that our residents and businesses feel more welcomed and that we're doing things at the speed of business. That being said, I had a question about the farms. So could anybody start a farm, even a collective, on these lands? And is there a limit? I mean, I know you're laughing, but it's a possibility, and I wanted to see if something could be put in the code to not let that happen.
Yeah, thank you, Council Member. As we've discussed in prior sessions, at this point, all medical cannabis operations are illegal in San Jose. There is a proposal that you provided that the council gave to staff in December regarding off-site cultivation, and we are looking at that for an ordinance that we're hoping to bring back to you in March. So the ordinance before you today is intended for legal products: tomatoes, basil, corn, etc.
Thank you. Again, thank you for the report and for taking the time to educate me on it personally. Thank you.
Councilor Campos.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. So getting back to the public, quasi-public designation, and I'm trying to read my notes here. Oh, so let's start with the special use permit and the conditional use permit. So I know in the CUP, the commission or whichever body can put conditions. And if those conditions are violated, there is a tool to bring them back in front of the authorizing body to either get them back into conformance or revoke their conditional use permit. Does that ability still exist with the special use permit?
Yes, I believe so. That's one of the things that we work very carefully on to make sure that as we craft conditions that they can in fact be enforced, that code enforcement can conduct our investigations, and that we can bring them back for an order to show cause or other action as appropriate.
Okay, so in order to show cause, hearing can be initiated through the special use permit as well?
Yes, and there's a separate code section in our municipal code that spells forth those parameters, as well as other enforcement tools.
Okay. Now, getting the public, quasi-public, and the zoning, and you're bag of tools for zoning. And I know that part of the purpose is for, General Assembly, churches, and schools. Now, with the schools, and I know that Councilmember Rocha and I have been very vocal about finding a land use designation that we can fit some of these schools in, but just finding a land use designation, at least with this staff report, doesn't go far enough, because we still don't know how to deal with them. We still don't know, is there a maximum height, massing of the building, distance from the street? And I know that we regulate daycare centers based on number of kids that can be on a playground. Well, that might work in a residential, but you have to use a completely different formula for a school. So is that coming, or is it kind of make it up as you go along?
The ordinance before you does propose basic development standards in terms of setbacks and building heights and that sort of thing, and that's appropriate for a zoning district. The referral that we received earlier from council regarding minimum square footage for play areas and other parameters, we are working to bring back to you a council policy that would set forth those guidelines. We're a little concerned about legislating them into our code, just because it's really not our core business. So that's work that's currently underway, and with everything else on our plate, we're hoping to bring that back to you later on in 2014 in the spring.
But and I know it's new, but it's a new reality that we're going to have to deal with. I mean, obviously the education community has fully gone forward with finding avenues to be able to offer different choices. But just like affordable housing or housing, we have expectations, and just because education isn't something that we do, it is affecting, our neighborhoods, the facilities, and we need to, if we need to go to the state and ask them, well, what do you guys do? Then I mean, that shouldn't be that hard, because again, doing it, just making it up when we're in front of at a council meeting, and there's an acre or two to play with, and we're having to make choices ourselves that you don't feel comfortable making, but you have to do it anyway. That's not good policy. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we should be driving the expectation as opposed to the expectation being driven to us. And so I'll just leave that at that as you come back with your recommendations at a future council meeting. And then lastly, just a quick question on number 7. It would be C7, changing bail bond establishments from a permitted use to a special use in the commercial pedestrian zoning district where located within the urban village. So existing bail bonds establishments, they use the CUP. They have to apply for new CUPs when those expire. What happens to those in these areas? Do they fall under legal nonconforming, and they can still get a CUP under legal nonconforming? It's in your recommendation. It's at the top of page 2.
Yeah, let me, I'm going to need to look at that a little bit more carefully.
Because my concern is that, you have these, and again, we dealt with this already, but you have these establishments that are set close to the jail to be able to have a convenient use for folks that need to use them. And this is sort of feeling like a way, once their CUPs expire, it's a way to, to get them out. Especially, we don't know what the county's going to do with the Civic Center complex, but it certainly looks like a good candidate for an urban village.
Yeah, and maybe I'm reading it a little bit differently. As I read our proposal, the bail bond establishments are permitted outside the urban village, but we are requiring the addition of a special use permit if it's in an urban village. So
Right.
we're adding an additional control for bail bonds.
Well, maybe I should ask, is that Civic Center complex area, is that a future urban village?
Yes, there are, yes, it includes.
So does that include some of the blocks that have existing
Right.
bail bonds?
Okay, now I understand where you're going. Yes, so if an establishment has a valid conditional use permit, then that runs with the land, and they would be legal non-conforming.
So even as it expires and they have to renew it?
We don't have, most of our permits no longer have expiration dates.
Okay, that's
Thank
my
you.
question. Thank you.
I apologize for
That's
the
okay.
delay. Mhm.
I have one request to speak on this item. We'll take that now. Lee Solon.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm an architect in the city, have worked for both the city of San Jose and some of the local school districts, and so I'm just interested in understanding some of the intent of the intended outcomes of the CUP process, particularly as it may relate to a school district having the opportunity or the ability to exempt itself. And if a school district did want to do that, are there alternatives to collaborating together to reach those outcomes other than through the CUP process? Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public testimony. I'll just ask staff to respond to that question because we've been talking about schools a little bit, and there's lots of different kinds of schools. You got your private schools, your public schools, your charter schools, and probably other religious schools, other categories as well. And so, City Attorney, could you speak to the exemption from our process rules?
The school districts, I think as suggested or pointed out by the last speaker, may exempt themselves upon a finding of the school board to so do it. So they're not. So then, in those cases, they are not subject to our zoning regulations. That's a power granted to them under state law. It's a power that I think frequently they've used in the past. And so this really doesn't change state law. It just sets forth a procedure, essentially, that where they would fit within our own code so that if they didn't exempt themselves, they would be subject to our rules.
So we know that school districts, all the ones I can think of that built public schools, just went to the state architect's office and did whatever they do, and they put it up, and they never came through City Hall to seek our permission or advice or a consent or anything else because is that because they exempted themselves?
Well, it's either they exempted themselves or they assumed they exempted themselves, and we didn't follow through in terms of enforcement. But that is the way the law works, or supposed to work, is that the school districts are subject to our regulations unless they exempt themselves. I think we've always assumed they've worked on the exemption process, but we haven't tallied the votes.
And this doesn't change that relationship. So they still have that power. Whether we like it or not, they get to do whatever they get to do. I don't think there are any other questions. Get a motion on this? Motion is to approve the staff recommendation. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed, so that's approved. A lot of work, staff. Thank you very much. And just an enormous amount of work if you tally up all of the zoning code work we've done over the last few years. All right, we will move to 4.3, housing related to parks program for parkland development.
Excuse me, Mayor and City Council. Matt Kano, Deputy Director, Parks, Recreation, Neighborhood Services. I do have one correction I need to make to the record. Exhibit A2, showing the 31st and Alum Rock Street property, shows the incorrect property boundaries. The property that it should be shown is on the south side of Alum Rock Avenue, just west of 31st Street. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Campos, you had a memo on this?
Yes, motion to approve.
Right, we have a motion to approve the application, et cetera. Staff recommended. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Unopposed? That is approved. Item 4.4 is next. Actions related to modification of the urban service area boundary for Evergreen 202. We have a motion to approve. On that motion, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That's approved. 4.5, a public hearing on the reorganization annexation of Moore Park number 22. Do we have any requests to speak on this item? We have a motion to approve. We'll take the public testimony first before we get into the discussion. Eugene Van Duyn, or Duin. I can't quite read the handwriting perfectly, but you'll correct me, I'm sure.
It's like sand dunes out the beach, but put a V in front of it.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes. First of all, this seems to be a project that's been on a fast track. It's been less than 4 months since it was initially. The change is from a residential property into mixed-use property, from 8 dwelling units per acre into more than 30, 4 times as much almost. There are a number of contentions inside the community, and we've gone through most of the meetings, tried to talk, but everything just seems to be smoothly passing through there. Most of the meetings that I've attended, or at least got a letter from, were always between 9 and 12 working days away. I don't know what the law says, but that seemed a very short time to get your apples all in a row and try to get something in front of the council. It is the community. We don't have attorneys. We don't have architects. We don't have consultants. We don't have the moneyed backgrounds of the owners, and yet this seems to be just moving right along at a very rapid pace. My property at 2500 Maywood is 7 lots away from the supposed annexation. Now, I understand that things move fairly rapidly, but I don't think the public in the neighborhood has a chance to respond to all the things that have happened in this very short period of time. We've heard the thing about the fire protection. I know it's a contention that the board will certainly improve that San Jose County has something in the 80th, the city of San Jose has in the 80th percentile, while the county has something like in the 96th percentile. Anyway, it seems that we're moving backwards in that point.
Sorry, sir, your time is up.
Thank you so much for your help.
Anybody else wish to speak on this item? That concludes public testimony. I'd like to give staff an opportunity to explain. Staff, what I see in front of me is they're coming into the city limits, and all the other issues are yet to be decided in some other form. I don't know. So, staff, could you go?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joe Harwell, Director of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement. This is the second time this item has been in front of the City Council. You may remember that we did a general plan change in late 13 for the same site. We've done a rezoning for the RM multifamily zoning district for this property for a senior housing project. I did put the location map up on the screen. So at this stage, we are annexing it into the city of San Jose, as you noted. The next step, the conditional use permit, would come forward, assuming the property is annexed into the city, where the final design of a project would be the decision of the Planning Commission. Staff has been out in meeting with the neighborhoods on numerous times to walk through this. As we have all the way through the general plan stage, we've shared the design of the proposed project. It actually has been refined. So we've worked our way through, and this is not the end of the process. So there's still more steps.
Well, just to respond to the public comments, the project and the design elements and what it's going to look like is yet to be decided. That's the conditional use permit. And about how far out in the future is that likely to move to the Planning Commission?
I think it would be falling right behind this. It has been worked through. We've done the community process, so it literally is waiting for the zoning to become effective and the annexation effective. So I would say in the next 60 to 90 days.
Oh, so not the next Planning Commission meeting, but...
No, but it is imminent.
Okay, a couple of months away probably. All right, Councilmember Oliverio.
Yeah, just want to summarize, it's a property owner initiated annexation. And actually, since the Planning Commission and Council voted on this item, some of the main issue from the community of the residents in the county pocket was the height. And actually, since that vote, they've actually reduced this one story, even though that's not connected to this, but just to let everyone know that that's a case in point in case the speaker did not know that. It's one story shorter than the community meeting that was done through the planning department. But that will come back through the conditional use permit process to the planning commission. Thank you.
Okay, the only thing in front of us today is whether or not it's coming into the city of San Jose. So we have a motion on that. We do have a motion to approve. On that motion, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That's approved. Item 4.6 is the next item. That's actions related to Three Creeks Trail Pedestrian Bridge Project. We'll have a minute for the staff to switch or add, it looks like. We'll have a staff presentation. And I do have some requests to speak from the public, which we'll take.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Julie Edmonds-Mares, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services. We're here today to talk about the Three Creeks Trail pedestrian bridge and seeking a series of actions related to the pedestrian bridge. To set some context here, a picture of the bridge on the left and then an orientation within the trail system on the right. Is there a red circle, Matt? Right there, that's the location. This bridge is a part of the city's interconnected trail network. Both the City of San Jose's Greenprint and General Plan guide development of the trail system with our 100-mile network goal and a possibility of really 130 miles if full build out. Currently, 55 miles are open of the trail network within the city, and actually that makes one of the nation's largest urban networks of trails. Health benefits for regular physical activity are well documented, and our residents in San Jose really enjoy our trail system, both for walking, cycling, jogging, etc. The trestle itself was purchased along with the other Three Creeks. We purchased 3.2 miles for Three Creeks Trail alignment through Willow Glen in December of 2011, shown in a green line through the page here. That's an important connection, both to connect both the downtown to the Willow Glen neighborhoods and connecting the Los Gatos Creek Trail to the Guadalupe River Trail. And the trestle itself is identified by the star for a geographic reference. There's a vital connection between the two trail systems, and certainly replacing this particular bridge will allow us to have some more predictability around operating and maintenance and sustainability with a concrete and steel bridge design. This particular trail system has been an item of interest within the community. We've had a series of outreach meetings around the master plan for the trail system, the bridge concept itself, in addition to some social media information. The council has seen this particular item on 4 separate occasions in 2003, March, April, May, and August. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Deputy Director Matt Cano, who's going to talk about community input and how that impacted the project design.
Thank you. We've worked with, as Julie mentioned, we worked with the community a number of times in 2013 to receive feedback not only on the trestle bridge, but also on the overall master plan for the entire trail. We found our inspiration in the historical canneries, the Del Monte water tank, and other truss-like structures from the former railway. This slide shows the bridge, future bridge spanning the Los Gatos Creek. It will be a decorative bridge with footings and approaches, a viewing area, a steel structure with a concrete deck. This next slide shows a different view of the bridge. Future bridge will have interpretive panels, logos from the rail lines that used to use the bridge, and truss-like structures on the railings. The viewing area on the bottom right-hand corner will also be a place where people can go and reflect and get away from the busy life and the busyness of the trail. We have some distinctive architecture and gateways that we're going to be using during the master plan for the entire future trail section. That master plan will be coming back to the City Council for approval probably in later 2014. And there's some images on this slide And on the next slide, you can see the canning labels and the pavement details. So we are really working very hard during not only the bridge design, but the master planning process for the entire trail system to reflect and remember the past of the area and of the rail lines that used to use the land. And here's another slide showing the water tower and the fruit processing and some of the labels. With that, I'll turn it over to Dave Sykes for the next part of the presentation.
Yeah, just briefly, just like to give the council an update on the status of the project as it's moving forward. We're at 65% design. We're going through the permitting process with all the permitting agencies so far. Those reviews are going very well. It's important to note that 2 of these agencies will not issue their permits until the city's issued its environmental clearance, and that's why we're here today. Typically, the environmental clearance would have been issued at the time of award, but since we need these permits to do that process, we've added this a step to have the council consider the environmental clearance so that these permitting agency will move forward with their permitting process. Also, as we have mentioned to the council before, we have a very short construction window. We need to be in the creek area between the months of June 15th and be out by October 31st, so it's critical that we take advantage of all streamlining measures possible. So we are asking the council to authorize myself the authority to award the project and resolve any protest and set the contingency so that we can meet the schedule for the project. Next, I'm going to pass it on to Assistant Director Laurel Provetti for the environmental process.
Thank you. We did an initial study and mitigated negative declaration to provide environmental clearance for this project. It had a public circulation period, and we received 19 comments. I want to thank the public for taking the time to read the documents carefully and provide their thoughtful comments. We responded to all of the comments in a supplemental memorandum that was distributed to you yesterday and posted on the city's internet site. We also forwarded the response and memorandum to all of the commenters so they would have the benefit of staff's response before this afternoon's hearing. You may hear testimony today regarding the possibility of the trestle itself being a historic resource. We looked at this question very carefully, and we have come to the conclusion that for purposes of environmental clearance, it is not a historic resource for the reasons and documentation provided in the initial study and mitigated negative declaration. And when it does come time for a motion, you may need to put some language to that effect in your motion for purposes of the record. With that, this concludes our staff presentation. We are available for the council's questions and also await the public comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to take the public comments at this time. Larry Ames, Bruce Tishnan, Scott Lane, and Richard Neesett. So come on down to the front.
Is this thing on? Yes. I'm sure you're tired of seeing me here on this topic. Trust me, I'm tired of losing a day's pay to be here, too. Each time I come here, you say it's already a done deal. And all these public meetings have been after you've already decided the issues. You have an updated mitigated negative declaration that acknowledges the community input, but then it ignores it by relying solely on a one-page report from 2004. Members of the public, including a state-listed historian, have given comment, and they stating that that Willow Glen archives that were discovered in 2008 reveal the interesting history of this trestle. Built in the early 1920s by the Western Pacific, its unique design precluded them from having to share their tracks with the larger rival, Southern Pacific. By profitably serving the canneries of Willow Glen and San Jose, the Western Pacific was able to emerge from bankruptcy and to challenge their rivals near monopoly across all of Northern California. This makes the trestle eligible for listing in the State Historic Register under Categories 1, broad patterns of local or regional history, and also possibly under Category 3, embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type of construction. You can't mitigate the destruction of historic structures simply by placing some signs. Our lawyers tell us that the CEQA law requires a full EIR with a fair evaluation of the alternatives. And hopefully you've all had an opportunity to read the letter that she sent you earlier this morning. I too worry about your loss about the Prop 40 grant. Let's use it as it was intended, to buy some parkland. And council member, I respect your efforts earlier, your early efforts in historic preservation. I hope that we can work together to save this quintessentially old Willow Glen structure. San Jose has a long and storied history. It was the first state capital of California. But what do you have to show for it? You have a road and some auto malls. Let's do better this time. Please do not approve the MND. Instead, let's work together to restore this historic structure, incorporate it into the trail network, and make it an iconic gateway to Willow Glen and a showpiece for all of San Jose. Thank you.
Bruce Dishnan.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you again. Ty McMahon has asked me to convey her apologies for being unable to be here today. It's ironic to hear Mr. Ames claim that he wants to work with you when it's very clear that he's ready to take the irresponsible course of suing to attempting to cause loss of the $1.6 million state grant by expirations who's suing to halt the project. I've sent you 2 letters today showing that the mitigated negative declaration will be entirely defensible in his litigation. He and the other trestle proponents attempt the impossible of making a mountain out of a molehill of insignificant impact on the environment and on history into a mountain of significant impact. I urge you to adopt the mitigated negative declaration, move forward with the project, follow your staff's recommendation. Thank you for your efforts.
Scott Lane.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, or good afternoon, sorry. Thank you for your time. Scott Lane speaking on my own behalf. Yes, I do love the extensive trail networks and do want this to be part of this trail network. It is a very distinctive bridge. There's also the Coyote Creek Bridge, which hopefully we can save. Well before Silicon Valley was technology center, we were the Valley of Heart's Delight. The trains themselves were a key engine to the California economy. We have amongst the most extensive network of not just trains, but obviously fruit orchards that some of us actually ran through. The canned fruit was taken overseas and throughout the U.S. So this has broad implications and patterns for the California economy, not just locally. Before World War I, this train was imagined for this train trestle, but there were very limited resources. So this was actually designed very lightly. You often hear that in aerospace: lighter, cheaper, faster, better. So this is very different. So it's like many other train trestles, but it's a little bit different as well. Also, the trestle was in fact important enough for the Santa Clara Valley Water District to provide a $450,000 grant with a $200,000 matching city grant. They did feel that having 81 pilings in the creek was not an issue. There are some biologists, in fact, that feel that a slower water is actually better for some species. So it is an amazing trestle. It will, I think, yield important information in the history of the area, and I think is something that San Jose, let me disagree with Dr. Ames, I feel San Jose has a rich tradition, a rich history of putting plaques over buildings that have been destroyed from our tradition. I would urge you, please, it is not too late to actually retrofit and refurbish the bridge and actually save money so we're not actually losing money here and taking money away from future park districts such as Del Monte. Thank you very much for your time.
Richard Niset and then Richard Zappelli.
Mr. Mayor and Council, thank you. I would like to take a moment to call your attention to what I think you now know is fairly considerable public opposition to this recommendation, and citing several points. First of all, as you've heard, an opinion that this trestle is in fact historic, one of only 2 remaining which played a significant role in the valley's commercial development, and demolition of a structure such as this cannot be mitigated. Secondly, demolition of a potentially historic structure should require a full EIR rather than just the opinion of staff. Grants were initially provided for restoring and not demolishing this trestle. And finally, a plan and a budget for the restoration of the trestle and use in the Three Creeks Trail has not been presented fully for the public's consideration. I implore you vote against this recommendation in favor of a plan for preservation of this historic structure in the surrounding environment that has for nearly 100 years adopted this trestle as part of its native landscape. Thank you.
Richard Zappelli.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. I'm here representing the Willow Glen Neighborhood Association and also Friends of Los Gatos Creek. Both organizations have been very active in the cleanup of the creek since April of last year and still are doing the same. We're concerned with the pollution in the creek and the environmental condition of the creek, and wildlife is just now beginning to return. At this time, we'd like to recommend that the City Council adopt the recommendation by the Parks Department as is. We've spent a year of this in our meetings. It's been advertised on our Facebook page. We have 18,000 members on our Facebook page at this time. We've had over 3,000 people engaged in conversation about this. We've printed over 30 flyers and posters and distributed all over Willow Glen, seeking either a positive or negative feeling about a new steel structure. The majority of our readers prefer the steel structure that will be here for another 100 years. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. That concludes the public testimony. Councilmember Oliverio.
Thank you, Mayor Reed. I just want to see, does staff have any comments based on feedback you heard from any of the speakers today?
Let me just chime in. I just want to sort of clarify how we see it. Under CEQA, there are mandatory, presumptive, and discretionary historic resources. The mandatory and the presumptive are really would require something more than your mitigated negative deck. Here is purely discretionary, whether the council wants to make a determination whether this is historic. And so to sort of piggyback on what Laura Pavetti said, we would recommend that if you are not going to make the finding that it's historic, that be included in the motion and for the reasons set forth in the draft mitigated neg deck.
So, City Attorney, a motion that would consist of, I'd like to make a motion to approve the staff recommendation plus the supplemental memo that came out declaring from staff that this is a non-historic structure.
It is not a historical resource for the purposes of CEQA for the reasons stated in the initial study mitigated neg deck.
So moved per your wording. Thank you for the second.
So we have a motion on the floor, Councilmember Oliverio.
And I just want to appreciate staff walking everyone through the different caveats, whether it's the permitting agencies that you're going through right now and how we need to have this approved so you can get the permit and so we can bid, because without the permit we don't have the bid to go build this thing. And as you mentioned, we have a narrow time to go build this, otherwise we lose the money. And I know that some people are passionate about this, but it would really ruin what's best for everyone. I mean, I went this weekend to the Los Gatos Creek to the cleanup with the Friends of Los Gatos Creek and Willow Glen Neighborhood Association. And great event, cleaning up the creek. You're all aware of those types of values. But what I saw were runners, walkers, and bikers using that trail. I was like, wow, there's so many people here. I hadn't, just like maybe because it was a great sunny weekend or something after the holiday. And I realized that, without this new safe bridge, we're not going to get that type of volume of people utilizing this area. It'll just be as it is today, which is a very problematic area. And that's really came through to me as a visual. And, we've invested so much money as government jurisdictions. And so this will allow us to, recoup that so that people can enjoy it. And I think it's also, it helps promote trails citywide. I think, once things like this happen and then we get more enthusiasm for trails and other parts of the area. And I know people use CEQA to stop things. They use it to stop housing. They use it to stop manufacturing facilities, gas stations, tall buildings, which all have some externality. But this is an inanimate object. That's what this is. We're replacing that. And it would clear the waterway and remove the contaminated wood. that's a fuel for a fire. And Dave, you didn't mention in your comments, but you had told me that the permitting agencies are actually want to see the structure removed. Can I confirm that?
That's correct, council members. The permitting agencies have been very happy with the proposal and supportive, and have indicated to us that they will be issuing permits once we get through this process.
Thank you. And I just wanted to finish with a letter that I received from a resident. They couldn't be here today because, like, you know, where we are in the day. And it's from a Rick Andraken. This gentleman lives on Leona Court. It's really adjacent to the creek. And he says, PIERLUIGI, I watched the city council discussion, so this is back in our August meeting, about going forward with the new bridge. The discussion about someone or a small group trying to get the old bridge restored, claiming that it's historic and are nostalgic. I live on the corner of Leona Court and Co Avenue. If I go out on my porch, I can see the, and he uses capital letters, eyesore bridge, surrounded by an ugly chain link fence that the homeless people just pull down and go around. I've lived here for 17 years and was here when the train actually went back and forth from the cannery. When the operational train stopped running, it was a little sad. However, now that all signs of the train are gone, I feel no nostalgia for the obvious eyesore bridge. Even without the toxic chemicals being present, I would love the structure removed. The homeless do have fires there. It is not a rumor. I truly fear them starting a large fire. I have witnessed several fires at the bridge and the bridge under Lincoln, as well, started by homeless. I love that the city and volunteers have been helping with the trails and can't wait for the bridge to connect the trails and future improvements to connect the trails. Almost every Sunday, I ride bikes on the trail through Campbell. What a wonderful trail. Unfortunately, a lot of the San Jose and Willow Glen trails do not connect, so we don't use them. The only people using the bridge area are homeless and people using drugs, and the volunteers trying to clean up after them. I welcome the new bridge to bring more residents to the trail. The residents' eyes on the structure will, I believe, help at least to partially keep the bad activities from the site. I'm both thrilled with you and your fellow city council members for going forward with this, but at the same time appalled that there's any delay for these unsubstantial reasons. I talk with residents near this structure, my neighbors, regularly, and do not know even one that would want to save this structure. So I'm confident that the vast majority, if not even 100% of local neighbors, support your plans to build a new bridge. I do not have the time to make most of these meetings, being a father of 4 very active girls, so I'm a resident that hopes my elected officials proceed wisely. Most of what I've seen you do seems to meet that criteria. You and the council seem to take the time to see all sides and proceed with what you deem to be the best course. Please continue with that practice. Also, please don't let one or a small alter good decision making, and bravo to the council. And that's just a summation from a person who lives right next door. Thank you.
Councilmember Campos.
Thank you, Mayor. So Rick, obviously there's the potential for a CEQA lawsuit. What's your feeling? I mean, do we get sued, or do you see a CEQA lawsuit coming forward based on the determination that this isn't historical, when you've got other entities, including a letter from Marvin Bamberg, who used to sit on our Preservation Action Council advisory board, and also has a business in Willow Glen, so it seems like he has an interest as well. And he's a respected person in this community, is basically telling us that this is, you can make an argument that it is historical.
The point that we're making, and I think the law, is that this is not a mandatory or presumptive historic resource. It's discretionary with the council. And so the legal question is whether or not it is subject to what's called the fair argument test or substantial evidence test. And in our view, it's the substantial evidence test, because if it was the fair argument test, there's no reason. This discretion makes no sense. I mean, it's in the discretion of the city council based on the record before it as to whether or not it wants to make a determination that it's historic or not in this case. And so that is the test. The issue is going to be, whether or not there's going to be a lawsuit. I'm not going to guess.
Okay.
I mean, we've seen them come, and sometimes they are filed, and sometimes they're not.
Okay. I'm not going to be supporting the motion. I think having to address the homeless issue is completely different on whether or not there's a steel bridge there or this bridge is preserved. The neighbors are are going to rely on the city to address the issue with folks living on the creek and, and doing what they do to survive. I think, I am concerned with, just with the elimination of a number of historical structures in this city. There aren't very many trestles, wooden trestles like this around. I didn't even know it existed until I got, I went to go see for myself. And when you get down to the creek, it's a jewel. And I think it's something that, if the initial intent was to try to preserve the bridge, I'm not making the connection as to how did that detour come along. And I did make the connection the last time at the council meeting, where we dealt with this as well. So I'm not going to support the motion. I'm even that much more concerned that that it's that easy for us to make a determination that something's not historical when you see that had a huge impact in the history of this valley. So, thank you.
Well, one of the ironies of the California Environmental Quality Act is it's full of ironies. So today we're arguing that something that would be good for the environment, getting the creosote-soaked wood out of the creek, help the water flow, help the creek, help the animals, is somehow shouldn't be allowed under CEQA because it's historic. First, I don't think it's historic. A lot of it is not even old. So it's just one of those ironies, and I think the trail is important. The Three Creeks Trail is especially important. We've been working on that project as a council for a long time. Many barriers to overcome to make it happen. This happens to be one of those barriers that we have the possibility of overcoming. We have the funding available, and we need to act. This is an opportunity we should take. It'll be good for the environment and much better for the environment than leaving the old structure in place. So I'm going to support the motion. Councilmember Liccardo.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question for staff. Jean Dresden sent me a pretty substantial account based on her research, and I'm just wondering, did that ever make its way to staff in your evaluation?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, we included it in the supplement that was distributed yesterday. All of the comment letters were distributed to the council. She does cite some very specific examples and resources or books that might explain the historic significance. Much of the commentary that we got was the importance of the railroad itself as a corridor. Right. And really that is distinct from the trestle structure itself. So really the action that you're taking regarding the trail is a wonderful way of celebrating this corridor as a transportation route. It's going to stay active for bicyclists and pedestrians, joggers, etc. So there's other ways of commemorating that transportation link, and that's one of the intents of this proposal.
Thank you, Lowell. And by the specific document you reference, is that the looks like a 6-page letter that was dated December 18th?
Yes, that was the letter that was submitted to us.
Apparently there's another document, but without belaboring the point, I understand she certainly makes references to the sources. And I do agree that much of the account seems to focus on the actual railroad rather than on the trestle. I certainly appreciate the necessity to move forward. This entire discussion has left me with a profound sense that the word historic is incredibly value-laden and has nothing to do virtually with any objective criteria. And what one individual views as historic is what another individual views as old. And it is my great hope that someday in our various efforts to reform CEQA and hopefully reach some sense of consensus, even here in the city of San Jose, about what historic means, this whole effort to define what is historic and what is not will be much more transparent. Anyway, thank you.
Councilor Rocha.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you help me understand? I've heard references to two different resources that talk about the historic nature, whether it's local, state, or the larger picture. One's the California Code of Regulations, the other is, I can't remember, but there was mention to whether there's local significance in the historical component, and then the other one doesn't reference that as a criteria, so to speak. Can you help me understand the difference between the two and which one we're using and why?
Yeah, certainly. Actually, we're looking at all of them.
Okay.
So we have the state, we've been working with the State Office of Historic Preservation, and they made a determination back in 2004 with documentation that this is a typical example of a common type of construction, and it had no association with important events or persons in local history. The comments that we received from the public in response to our negative declaration attempted to bring forth documentation to refute that in fact there is new data, new evidence, the letter that Councilmember LICCARDO mentioned and others. And as we went through that, again, it was more around the railroad as a corridor and less around the value of the structure. So there's, evidence for council's consideration. One expert says that it does meet the state criterion. Other experts, including the State Office of Historic Preservation, that says it does not. So that's at the state level. At the local level, we have our own municipal code guidelines around historic landmark designations. We have those criteria are set forth in Title 13 of our municipal code, and they include things like, important events, persons, or architectural significance, etc. For purposes of CEQA, however, that is distinct than the landmark designation. So we have not, the City Council has not taken action to landmark the trestle as a historic resource. So that's a separate question than whether or not this is historic for environmental purposes.
Okay, so environmental and structural are the two differences?
Right. So if we had a landmark designation and the council had earlier said this is a historic landmark, then as council had advised under CEQA, then we would be in a whole different ballgame. It would have already had local significance for historic preservation because council had taken that step. In this case, council has not made that action. So this afternoon, as part of your motion, one of the items that's in the motion is a finding that for environmental clearance purposes only, the council is finding that this is not a historic resource.
Okay. So the council had the opportunity to make a declaration that this was of historic significance.
And we have a whole process that goes through it, that with hearings before our Landmarks Commission, and again, public hearings before you.
But the council could have made that.
You could, but I think, again, from staff's recommendation and from our analysis of the facts that have been brought forward, we don't see that this is, in fact, a historic resource, at least, for that purpose.
But the council could have.
Yes, you are the council.
So then if we had done that, then it would have had that. So
yes,
we can
and you are the
say
council
here that it doesn't because we found that it doesn't, but we also, it could because we could have also said it does.
That's right.
So then this is just
That's
more
right.
of a,
that is,
okay.
That is within your discretion. So
Understood.
again, we want to make sure you know that you have that choice.
What the professional staff's recommendation is.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Then I had a question on the direction in item number 2. I'm sorry, yeah, B1. And so you're not going to return to council for that? You're going to put it out to bid?
That's correct, Council Member. Should the bids come in within the amount that we've described here, we would move forward with the award process as delegated by the council.
And the reason we're doing that is given the timing.
It is strictly a timing. We're trying to make sure this project is ready to go to construction and start construction on June 15th. So we've got to complete the plans, get the permits, advertise, award, and execute the contract. So just a time-saving measure.
And when was the last action on this? If you could refresh my memory, was it October? Like honestly can't remember.
The last, the last actions on this on April 9th, the council approved the consultant agreement to design the replacement option. And then on August 13th, as a summary of the May 15th Rules Committee meeting, we also had a significant discussion on the item.
So between now and then, that we couldn't have gotten this any earlier, so we could have had that come back to council?
Oh, actually, on the date Matt spoke of when the council gave their approval to move forward with the design, we've been going through the design process and the permitting process. So we're currently at 65% design. As I mentioned earlier, all the permit agencies have been engaged and the applications have been made. So we're trying to pull all that together. Once we get their comments, we can also do the final design and then put the project out to bid.
Okay.
So we have been working extremely hard from the day the council said go.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't suggest that we have. I guess I just keep running into, and I know this isn't a reflection of staff, in my opinion. I just, after that first vote, I've just ever since then felt that we could have done better on this project. And it has never sat right with me, and I've been pretty clear in a couple meetings about this in Rules Committee and Council, that I just felt that and I'm going to put that on me, I could have done better the first time around when this came to me. And given that, I hate being in a position where I have to make a decision on something that I don't know is the best outcome, and I know staff has done a heck of a lot of work. Every time this item has come in front of us, you've done a great job of putting the paperwork in front of us, giving us the reasons and the case behind it. I just still think there was a decision point back sometime where we had an opportunity to maybe do a little bit different on this project, and again, I'll put the failure on myself that I didn't step up on that. So with that, I'm not comfortable supporting this. Thank you.
Councilor Herrera.
Thank you. And I just want to thank the community members that have come out. And there was a lot more, I think, last time we heard this, but I appreciate those who are passionately in support of maintaining the trestle, as well as folks who have different opinion. I think that's what's great about our community is that we are able to hear all sides and that people are involved, and I think that's what's really important. I really have a heart for the historic preservation aspect of this too, and when I first heard about it, my first instinct was, let's save the trestle. That was my first instinct, because I love the historic aspects, and I think that we've lost a lot of history. No one can doubt that. In San Jose, lots of things have been torn down that probably shouldn't have been. But as I learned more about this and looked at the total decision that we had to make, and oftentimes we don't get to make the ideal decision. It would be nice if we could make a decision that made everybody happy and that satisfied everything, but that isn't usually the way it goes in here. We have to make the best decision with the information we have. I don't know, maybe many years ago at a certain point, maybe the trestle could have been saved as a historic item. I don't know. It's not important today for this decision, but it crosses my mind. Is that part of it, that we didn't, had there been a decision many years ago that this was something we wanted to preserve and that it was a historic resource, maybe the way that it would have been maintained would have been different. I don't really know. But we are where we are today, and the best option to me is to move forward with the bridge that we're planning to construct. And I appreciate Councilmember Oliverio's involvement in actually going down and taking the initiative to see what's going on in the environment and with the people that are actually there. So, it's not a perfect decision. I can't remember too many perfect decisions up here, but I think it's the right decision to move forward, and we keep the money that's going to make this trail a reality. We put a bridge that's safer. I do have a couple of questions. One, I noticed Green Foothills most of these folks that wrote substantial questions, even if they weren't opposing what staff's recommending. And part of my reason for voting yes on this is because I think it's a better solution in terms of the environment. But there have been a lot of questions about, in taking down this bridge, are we disturbing things that are going to create problems that are worse than leaving it where it is? So can you address that? And then second, is there another, are there other trestle bridges or other similar things that could be preserved in San Jose, or has there been a case where we've preserved a structure like that under historic conditions, where we've declared it a historic resource? Anything similar where we have done that? So those two questions.
Yes, thank you, Councilwoman. We did respond to the comments from Committee for Green Foothills as well as the other commenters. We modified the initial study in some places just to tighten it up a little bit and to address those specific concerns. We did identify protection of wildlife and fish species during construction in our memorandum to the council that was distributed yesterday. So while there is going to be some disturbance, we believe that the impacts are not at a level of significance. So we've identified appropriate mitigation measures. If council approves the action before you, you will also be approving a mitigation monitoring report. This is something that we bring back to the T&E committee every 6 months in terms of green light, red light, who's abiding by their mitigations. So if this is approved, those mitigations will go onto that report and we'll be able to report back to the council how well we're doing with implementing all those mitigation measures. In terms of other trestle structures, we understand there are other trestle structures even here within the city of San Jose. We do not have since we don't own them, we don't have our own program for preservation. But if that's something the council's interested in us looking at, we can work with those owners. We could, entertain. We don't have a historic preservation program right now in terms of a proactive funded program, but if that's something the council would like to consider during the budget process, we'll be happy to participate.
Who funds, so it's private groups that are promoting funding, because it takes money to preserve things that are historic, right? So,
oh, yes.
So it's really up to private organizations to carry the water on that, to work hard for that.
Mm-hmm.
And has there been anything, though, brought forward to us that was a structure that we have preserved that doesn't have to be a trestle, just anything in that category that we've ever considered historic? I'm just curious if that's happened in the past.
Well, certainly a lot of buildings, and we've been saving our water towers. So like at the Del Monte housing development, we saved that water tower and it's incorporated into the private development. So those iconic elements within the city, as we do the urban village for the Alameda, we're not touching Babe, the Muffler Man. That statue is staying, or sign, whatever you want to call it. We recognize that even though it's not a landmark according to our code, it's a significant icon for the city of San Jose. So it's fully our intent as we move forward with projects in the city that as much as we can incorporate those iconic elements, those pieces that really speak to San Jose's unique heritage, that of course we want to preserve them. This situation, we had some trade-offs, and so staff is presenting to you the best option for your consideration.
So if Babe the Muffler Man was leaking creosote all over the ground or doing something that was causing pollution, we might not be wanting to preserve Babe either.
Or we may need to repaint it.
Not trying to attack Babe.
With some other non-lead-based paint or something.
And so, I think it's important, though, that as we move along with our general plan and we are developing across the city, that we get the input from the community as to what they think are things worth preserving, that we continue to do that, because I think the inclination to preserve our history is a really good one, and it's what makes our community unique. And I do think that we need to be really listening to our community about that, and wherever we can, preserving those things. Thank you.
I think that concludes the council conversation on this. We do have a motion with the two resolutions and appropriation ordinance with the resolution modified to add the council finding that it's not historic, as outlined by Councilmember Oliverio. I've got everybody here. On that motion, all in favor? Opposed? I count 1, 2 opposed, Campos and Rocha opposed. Motion carries. One more item to go, item 4.7. Actions related to the hazardous vegetation report for removal of weeds or refuse for the 14-15 cycle. I have one request to speak on that. Gene Dresden.
Good afternoon. I'm Jean Dresden, and I'll make this as quick as I can, given the time. In this report and this plan, it calls for cutting grass on open space down to 6 inches everywhere. There are a number of places where private companies are working with the Audubon Society to protect burrowing owls. Burrowing owls like 6-inch grass for their homes, but in order to eat, they need taller grass. And there are companies that are actively managing those big acreage so that there are islands of taller grass where the little rodents eat and create food for the owls. If we have an absolute blanket statement of 6-inch grass, the birds will have homes but nothing to eat. So I express concern about the plan and the language, the way it's written. Some of the companies that are doing this active work with Audubon have expressed concern about the language. I asked the question, do we have any flexibility in this? Could we write it in a way so that the birds can have something to eat and we can still have fire protection? Thank you.
That concludes the public testimony. We have staff here to answer any questions. Councilor LICCARDO.
Thank you. I was just notified by Audubon Society a few minutes before the hearing of concerns about species impacts here, at least on a couple of parcels, and I'm wondering, is there, I think as Jean suggested, is there some flexibility here?
Thank you for the question. Diane Buchanan, Deputy Director for Code Enforcement. We have, we contract with the county Agricultural and Environmental Management to do this work, and we have a representative here, and he can address that subject.
Thanks, Dan.
The minimum fire safe standard would depend on the size of the property. If the property is over an acre in size, it would typically be a 30-foot perimeter around the property and cross breaks depending on if it's more than 10 acres or more than 5 acres in size. In some properties, because of the fire danger, there have been recommendations by the city staff to do more work than that, but generally the basic standard would be 30-foot perimeter and 30 foot around any structure that might exist on the property.
I understand the standard. I guess the question is when there's apparent impact on species, is there some flexibility in the standard?
There can be, however, in most cases, the California laws require that the fire protection takes precedence over the protection of the species. We try, and we only mow grasses. Again, if the question is leaving some grasses over the 6 inches in height, that's perfectly acceptable as long as there's a perimeter fire break. If the city wishes to do less, then we, of course, would follow whatever the city asked us to do. It does, of course, increase the fire risk from a fire spreading from that property to a property that may have a structure and potentially people being harmed.
I see Laurel wants to jump in.
Thank you. And we certainly appreciate Jean and the Audubon Society bringing this to our attention. Since there are some specific parcels of note, we will work with Audubon and Shawnee to get those particular parcels so that we can talk more specifically with the county about our vegetation management for those sites. It is a balancing act. We do mow, we do not disc. And that was very deliberate to make sure that we are not hurting the burrowing owl. So we'll follow up certainly with the Audubon and make sure that we're doing the right management technique for those parcels.
Great, thanks, Laura.
Councilmember KALRA.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to mention that since this is the last item for which Joe Horridell will be appearing before us, isn't it? It's
not necessarily.
Why? Is he coming back?
Let's just say it's probably not the last.
Okay. Well, anyway.
I'll be back next week.
Details to be worked out.
He has withdrawn his retirement, so he's going to be continuing to work for the city of San Jose for many, many years. So thank you, Joe, for doing that. Appreciate it.
Well, so does that mean we have to watch city employees and other public officials act again? Anyway. Never mind.
We have a motion to approve the matter. Councilmember CAMPOS.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. You know, in the past, like cows and goats and sheep were used and not necessarily mowers. Is that being considered by the county, or have we, gone down that?
If livestock is present on the property, we don't do any mowing on there. However, using livestock for the purpose of abatement from our standpoint is quite expensive. And since the property owner would be required to pay it, if we did it, we have to use a more economical means. Mowing with a tractor would be the most economical for the amount of work that would be required.
So I have a different question. Are you from the county, or are you the person who's contracting to do the maintenance?
I'm the weed abatement coordinator with the County of Santa Clara's Department of Agriculture and Environmental Management.
Wonderful. So what are you guys doing on our medians for our expressways?
The medians for the median for the expressways is part of the Roads and Airports Department, and they have their own schedule for maintaining those. Unfortunately, we have no rights to do public-owned property. We have the laws that we apply only apply to privately owned property.
And as far as the foothills and the are you also talking about the parks? Like, for example, Quicksilver Park in my district is county owned. Are we also talking about mowing those fields, or?
Well, there are big parts of that particular park that are scheduled for mowing. We're currently in negotiations with the Parks Department to possibly take over that responsibility so that it's consistent with everything else that we're doing. They do have a process for getting that work done, but when it's park staff, they're very limited in getting to all of the locations they have to handle. It's very time consuming, so they may get to it much later than I would be able to do. We are working on that, and we do a lot of hillside work on the private parcels and those adjacent to parks and public lands. But public lands requires an entirely different agreement with the agency that owns and controls those public lands.
Thank you.
We have a motion to approve on the table. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? We have none opposed. Motion is approved. That's the last business item. We have the open forum. Ross Signorino and William Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Thursday, I think something momentous happened when I go to many meetings, but one of the meetings that I went to, and it was truly gratifying, when I went to the VTA meeting and Councilman Cava, I forgot your name, but nonetheless came up and said that the closed forum, the closed session is going to be done after the meeting so people can have a chance to participate in the government. And that was good because this is, and he showed that this is a government for the people, by the people, and that people have a right to come up individually and express themselves and in a proper manner, that they don't get so exhausted waiting for the moment to come for that meeting. And the president of the VTA brought that forward, and I'm sure there was a lot of other people who participated in that. And that was a great moment for the people, no matter what. And whatever you do, Sammy, make sure you tell Alex that, what happened on Thursday night.
William Stewart.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, Mayor and members of the City Council. I've come here to speak on an issue of fraud, waste, and abuse. Apparently, the city is paying for private lawsuits of city employees or city employees sued in their private capacity, for which the city, which has in the past has had budgetary problems, as I understand it, is paying the legal fees or providing the legal services and legal defense for city employees being sued in their private capacity. I ask that the city not be a party to lawsuits, defense for city employees sued in their private capacities. Specifically, I know that this practice has been going on since 2008, when I experienced a home invasion without warrant by the San Jose PD, in which they brutally battered a widow and permanently disabled her 1 week after she had had knee surgery. I'm now aware that Doyle, Fremond, and Nielsen of the city attorney's office are now defending 5 police officers sued in their private capacity, which is totally inappropriate to use public funds to defend city employees sued in their private capacity. I hope you understand the issues of using public funds to provide legal assistance to public servants who are sued in their private capacity. And this is because they violated civil rights laws.
Sorry, your time is up.
Thank you. I have a handout that
If you'd like to pass it over to the clerk, she'll
it's been
circulate
given
it.
to the district attorney and filed into the federal court regarding just this.
If you want it
judicial
to us, give it to the clerk, she'll circulate it to the council. That concludes the open forum, concludes our meeting. We're adjourned.